My father pointed past my 12-year-old daughter toward the kitchen, as if he were dismissing hired help. Guests first. You can eat later. Lucy looked at the cousins already eating from plates she had helped serve, then back at him. I thought I was family too. My mother did not even lower her voice. Then act like it. I said nothing. I took Lucy's hand and left. The next morning, I stood beside a realtor as she rang my parents' doorbell holding papers with their address across the top, and I watched my mother's face go white. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting your child, tell me where you're listening from. The worst part was that, an hour before my father pointed toward that kitchen, I would have told you we were having a perfectly ordinary Bennett family Christmas. Not a perfect one. We had never been a perfect family. My mother liked things done her way. My father believed a holiday schedule should be followed with the seriousness of an airport departure board, and I had spent most of my adult life smoothing the rough edges before anyone else noticed them. But ordinary felt safe to me. Ordinary meant I knew which comments to ignore, which chores to pick up without being asked, and how to keep Lucy from seeing the little imbalances I had learned to call personality. We arrived at my parents' house just after noon with cold air following us through the front door and a casserole dish warming my palms through 2 oven mitts. The house looked exactly the way my mother wanted Christmas to look. Garland ran along the stair rail. Battery candles glowed in the front windows. A ceramic village crowded the sideboard in the dining room, each tiny house dusted with fake snow. The smell of roasted turkey, onions, cinnamon, and furniture polish had settled into every room. For 5 years, Patricia and Robert Bennett had lived there. For almost as long, they had called it our place, the family house, or simply home. I had stopped correcting them because, most of the time, there had seemed to be nothing worth correcting. Lucy kicked snow from her boots on the mat and barely got her coat off before my mother appeared from the kitchen, with a dish towel over one shoulder. Her eyes went first to me, then to the casserole, and finally to Lucy. She kissed my daughter on the cheek and told her she was just in time because Grandma needed her dependable girl. Lucy smiled at that. She always smiled at that. I remember smiling too. That is the part I have had to be honest with myself about. My mother did not invent Lucy's eagerness in one afternoon. Lucy genuinely liked cooking with her. She liked measuring flour with the old metal cups Patricia had owned since I was a child. She liked being trusted with a sharp enough knife to chop celery under supervision. She liked hearing that she was mature. When Patricia asked her to carry napkins to the table, Lucy did it without complaint. When she was sent back for the butter dish, she went. When my mother realized the water glasses had not been filled, Lucy filled them while I set my casserole on a warming tray. At first, none of it looked wrong. My sister Amanda arrived 20 minutes later with Chloe and Owen. Chloe was 10, Owen 8, both pink-cheeked from the cold and loud in the easy way children are loud when they know they are welcome. My mother hugged them, took their coats herself, and told them to go see what Grandpa had put under the tree. My father called from the living room that there might be something with their names on it if they looked hard enough. Owen ran. Chloe followed at a slower pace, already trying to guess which wrapped box belonged to her. Lucy heard them and leaned toward the kitchen doorway. "Go ahead," I told her automatically. "You can see, too." My mother was checking the gravy. "In a minute. Lucy, honey, can you bring me the serving spoon from the bottom drawer?" Lucy turned back without hesitation. I did not object. That matters too. I had a whole collection of explanations ready before I even needed them. Chloe and Owen did not visit as often. Lucy lived closer. Lucy liked helping. My mother was almost 70 and had been on her feet since morning. It was one spoon, one stack of plates, one pitcher of water, one quick trip downstairs because my father thought there were more folding chairs in the storage room. Every request, taken by itself, was so small that objecting to it would have made me feel ridiculous. So I helped too. I carried the green beans in. I moved a lamp to make space near the dining room wall. I found the extra salt shaker my mother insisted had disappeared. though it was exactly where she always kept it. That was the role I knew. I saw a gap, and I filled it. I had been doing it for so long, I no longer thought of it as a choice. The dining table could seat 8 comfortably and 10 if everyone accepted that elbows would collide. That year there were 7 of us. My parents, Amanda, her 2 children, Lucy, and me. There was room. No one was being squeezed out by mathematics. That simple fact would become important later, but at the time I was thinking about whether the roles were getting too dark. By 2 o'clock, the food was ready. My mother announced that everyone should come to the table before things got cold. Amanda came in with Chloe and Owen. Dad washed his hands and took his usual chair at the head. I started toward the place beside Lucy's empty chair, then realized Lucy was still in the kitchen. She was carrying a bowl of mashed potatoes almost as wide as her torso. I stepped toward her. "I can get that. I've got it," she said, and there was a little pride in her voice. Patricia followed behind with the gravy boat. "See, my dependable girl." Lucy smiled again. The cousins sat. Amanda sat. Dad sat. My mother pointed me toward my chair, and then told Lucy where to put the potatoes. Lucy set them down carefully, adjusted the spoon so the handle would not slide into the bowl, and started around the table because Patricia asked her to make sure everyone had water. That was the first moment the scene stopped looking ordinary to me. Chloe was showing Owen something on her phone under the edge of the table. Amanda told them to put it away until after dinner. Dad was already cutting into a roll. My mother lowered herself into her chair with a small sigh and reached for the cranberry sauce. Lucy was still standing. She refilled Owen's water, then Chloe's. Then my father asked her to bring the pepper because the shaker beside him was nearly empty. She went back to the kitchen. My mother asked her to bring the basket with the second batch of rolls. She did that too. I looked at the empty chair. It was there. It had been there the entire time. I had seen Lucy help at holidays before. I had seen my mother ask more of her than the younger children, because Lucy was older, but there had always been some natural stopping point in my mind. You helped set the table, and then you ate. You carried dishes in, and then you joined everyone. You did not remain on your feet while the rest of the children were told to relax because they were guests. Patricia passed turkey to Chloe and asked whether she wanted white meat or dark. Owen complained that gravy had touched his carrots, and my father laughed as if this were a charming emergency. Lucy returned with the rolls and set them near the center. "Anything else?" she asked. My mother glanced at the kitchen. "Just check the stove and make sure I turn the burner off under the corn." Lucy went. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. I almost stood up then. I wish I could tell you I understood everything immediately and acted before she had to feel any of it. I did not. Old habits are not dramatic when you are inside them. They feel reasonable right up until they do not. Part of me still thought my mother would call Lucy back in 30 seconds and tell her to sit down. I waited for the correction because I was used to believing the people I loved would eventually correct themselves. Lucy came back. She had finished the last thing anyone had asked of her. She wiped her hands on the side of her sweater, looked at the open chair, and pulled it back. My father lifted one hand. He pointed past her toward the kitchen. "Guests first, you can eat later." The words were not loud. That made them worse. He sounded as if he were reminding her of a rule everyone should already understand. Lucy froze with one hand on the chair. Her eyes moved to Chloe and Owen. Both of them were already eating from plates Lucy had helped put on the table. Chloe stopped chewing. Owen looked down at his food. Amanda's face changed, but she did not speak. Lucy looked back at my father. "I thought I was family too." There are sentences that seem too small to split your life into a before and after. That one did. My mother did not even lower her voice. Then act like it. For 1 second, no one moved. I heard the refrigerator humming in the kitchen. I heard a fork touch a plate. I saw Lucy's fingers release the back of the chair. I said nothing. Not because I had nothing to say. I had too much. Every possible argument arrived at once, and behind all of them was the knowledge that, if I started, the room would become about me and my parents. My father would defend himself. My mother would explain what she meant. Amanda might try to calm everyone down. Lucy would stand there, while 4 adults debated whether what had just happened to her was really what had happened. I would not make her wait through that. I pushed my chair back, walked to Lucy, and held out my hand. "Coat," I said softly. She stared at me. "We're going home." My mother said my name, sharp enough to stop me on any other Christmas of my life. I did not answer her. I took Lucy's hand, got our coats from the front hall, and walked out into the cold. The front door closed behind us on warmth, turkey, candles, and the family dinner I had spent half my life trying to keep peaceful. Snow had started coming down in thin, dry flakes. Lucy did not cry until we were in the car. Even then, she cried quietly. I started the engine and turned the heat high. The windshield fogged at the edges. For a minute she watched the snow collect on the hood, as though she were waiting for me to tell her what she had done wrong. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry I made Christmas weird." I turned toward her so quickly my seatbelt caught. "You didn't. I should have waited." She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. Grandma still had stuff to do. I thought because everyone was sitting down, I could sit too. That hurt more than my father's words. "You could." She looked uncertain. "I mean it, Lucy. You did nothing wrong." She stared at the dashboard. After a while, she said Grandma liked that she was responsible. There was no accusation in it. She said it like a fact that should explain everything. She had been useful, so she had been good. She had stopped being useful too soon, so maybe she had caused the problem. I had heard versions of that logic in my own head for years. Not in those words. Adults make it sound more respectable. We call it being dependable, being the stable one, being the person who can handle more. We tell ourselves there is virtue in not keeping score. Sometimes there is. But sitting in that car with my daughter apologizing because she had tried to eat dinner, I saw how easily a virtue could become a job no one had asked if you wanted. I did not explain all of that to a 12-year-old. I told her she was my daughter, not the family employee, and that eating with her cousins was not something she had to earn. She nodded, but I could tell the words had not settled yet. At home, neither of us wanted the dinner I had planned to make from leftovers the next day. I scrambled eggs and made toast instead. Lucy changed into sweatpants and sat at the kitchen counter while I cooked. The ordinary sound of the toaster popping made me want to cry, which annoyed me enough that I did not. My phone buzzed several times on the counter. I turned it face down. I did not need to read my mother's explanations yet. I already knew what form they would take. She had needed help. Lucy was older than Chloe and Owen. Family helped family. Dad had been tired. Everyone was hungry. I had taken one moment too personally. For once, I did not want to spend the evening deciding which version of their explanation would allow me to forgive them fastest. After Lucy went upstairs, I sat alone at my dining table. The house my parents lived in came into my mind with an almost embarrassing clarity. Not the Christmas decorations, not the dining room, the paperwork. I had bought that 3-bedroom house in 2015 as an investment, years before my parents lived there. When they downsized 5 years ago, letting them move in had seemed practical and kind. They paid me rent, though far less than the place could have brought on the open market. I handled the taxes, insurance, and major repairs. I had never minded. Or, more accurately, I had trained myself not to mind. They were my parents. Family helped family. I sat with that phrase until it no longer sounded generous. Then I opened my laptop. I did not search for revenge. I did not calculate how to scare them. I looked at the property file, the occupancy agreement, the maintenance notes, and the last market estimate I had saved. I had spent years treating the house as if it were emotionally untouchable because my parents lived there. That night, for the first time, I asked a different question. If this arrangement was helping create a place where my daughter was expected to serve while other children were invited to sit, why was I still protecting the arrangement? I could have called my parents that night and demanded an apology before I did anything else. I even opened a blank message and typed the first few words. Then I stopped. An apology extracted under threat would not change what I had seen at that table, and another argument would put me back in the role I knew best, explaining, negotiating, making everyone understand me well enough that I could feel permitted to act. I closed the message instead. The property folder was less emotional. It contained the things feelings could not rewrite. My name on the purchase documents from 2015, the insurance renewals, repair invoices, and the simple month-to-month agreement I had drawn up when my parents moved in. I did not need any of those papers to prove the house was mine to myself. I needed them because looking at them reminded me that kindness had been a choice. Somewhere along the way, I had started treating that choice as a permanent obligation. I found Denise Carter's number in my contacts. Denise was a local realtor I knew well enough to trust with a straightforward question and not well enough to turn it into family gossip. I texted first because it was Christmas night and told her there was no emergency, but I wanted to discuss listing a rental property I owned. I expected an answer the next day. She replied 20 minutes later. She was available in the morning. If I was serious, she could meet me at the property for an exterior look and bring preliminary listing material so we could talk through next steps. Nothing would be placed on the market without the normal preparation. Nothing would happen to the occupants overnight. She was simply willing to start. That was exactly what I wanted. Start. I confirmed the appointment. Then I went upstairs and checked on Lucy. She was awake, reading under the lamp by her bed. I kissed her forehead and told her again that she had done nothing wrong. This time she did not apologize. It was not the same as believing me, but it was a beginning. The next morning was bright, bitterly cold, and painfully normal. Christmas wreaths still hung on doors up and down my parents' street. Trash bins were crowded with flattened boxes. A plastic Santa across the road had collapsed face first into someone's lawn. Denise parked behind me at 9:30. She stepped out carrying a leather folio and a slim stack of printed pages clipped together. The top page had the property address in bold near the top. She greeted me quietly, asked once if I was sure I wanted to begin the process, and I said yes. We walked up the front path together. For the first time in 5 years, I looked at the house not as my parents' home, but as property I owned, and had allowed them to use under terms I could change. Denise rang the bell. I stood beside her. My mother opened the door in a cardigan, her hair pinned up loosely, surprise already forming on her face when she saw me. Then her eyes moved to Denise, then to the papers in Denise's hands. She saw the address. The color left her face. Not anger first, fear. That caught me off guard. My mother looked from the page to me, then back to Denise. Claire didn't tell you when we're supposed to be leaving, did she? Denise paused. That was not what she had come to discuss. And standing there in the cold, I realized my mother did not look like a woman who had just learned her daughter was angry. She looked like a woman whose plan had just been interrupted. For a few seconds, none of us answered my mother. Denise shifted the folder against her coat. She had the polite, neutral expression of a professional who had just realized she had walked into a family situation that had started long before she arrived. We haven't discussed a move-out date yet, she said. Today was only to look at the exterior and go over preliminary listing information with Claire. My mother looked at me as if Denise had confirmed something worse. You brought a realtor here the morning after Christmas? There were a dozen ways I could have answered that. I could have reminded her of Lucy standing beside an empty chair. I could have repeated Dad's words. I could have asked why she had looked frightened before she looked angry. Instead, I kept my voice level. I told Denise I wanted to start the process. The front door opened wider. My father appeared behind my mother in yesterday's flannel shirt, one hand braced on the frame. He looked at Denise, then at me, and the expression on his face was less fear than disbelief. This is ridiculous. Denise glanced at me. I gave her a small nod that told her I did not expect her to referee. Dad continued before I could speak. He said Christmas had gotten out of hand, that Lucy had been helping her grandmother the way she had helped 100 times before, and that I had turned one awkward moment into something it was not. Mom stepped in more gently. She said everyone had been tired. She said Chloe and Owen were guests because Amanda did not bring them over as often. She said Lucy knew the kitchen and liked being useful. She even used the word misunderstanding, as if the empty chair had been a scheduling error. I listened until I realized they were not trying to understand why we had left. They were trying to make the event small enough that my response would look unreasonable. I'm not going to argue about dinner on the front step, I said. The housing arrangement is ending. I will follow the agreement we already have. You will have the notice period it requires. Dad actually gave a short laugh. Nobody is going anywhere. He said it with the calm certainty he had once used when I was 16 and asked to drive 3 friends to a concert. It was not a threat, it was an assumption. In his mind, a rule still existed simply because he had stated it. I looked past him into the entryway. The garland was still wrapped around the stair rail. Lucy's boots had left faint salt marks on the mat the day before. The ceramic village was visible through the dining room doorway. All those tiny houses lined up exactly where my mother had placed them. Then I looked back at my father. I'm not asking you to leave today. His jaw loosened a fraction, as if he had heard the beginning of a retreat. I'm telling you, I'm ending the arrangement properly. The fraction disappeared. Mom folded her arms across her cardigan. Over one dinner. I did not answer that argument again. The scene had already happened. I had no intention of spending the next hour proving that I had seen what I had seen. I turned to Denise. Can we walk the outside? My mother stared at me. You're doing this now? Yes. The word came out quieter than I expected. That seemed to bother her more than if I had shouted. Denise and I stepped away from the porch. My parents did not invite us inside, which was fine. There had never been any plan to enter that morning. We walked the perimeter from the public-facing areas, looked at the roofline from the driveway, noted the age of the exterior paint, the condition of the gutters, the fenced backyard, and the fact that the neighborhood still showed well even in late December. Denise spoke in practical terms. She told me what buyers in that part of suburban Columbus were paying for 3-bedroom houses, what work would matter before photos, and what could be left alone. She also reminded me that selling with occupants required planning and reasonable notice for any later interior access. The normality of the conversation steadied me. There was something almost merciful about talking to someone who did not care who had cooked the turkey. When we reached the sidewalk, Denise asked whether my parents had always known I owned the house. Yes. Any ownership claim from them? Money invested as equity? Anything unusual I need to know before we go further? No. That answer was easy, because the history was simple. I bought the house in 2015, when I was 32, because I wanted one boring investment in my life. That was how I thought of it then. Boring. A modest 3-bedroom, with an attached garage, a small yard, and a furnace that had already survived more Ohio winters than I trusted. I had saved for the down payment, financed the rest, and spent the first few years renting it at market rate, while I learned that being a landlord mostly meant getting calls when water appeared, where water should not be. My parents had nothing to do with the purchase. They never contributed to the down payment. Their names were never on the deed, mortgage, insurance, tax bill, or repair invoices. When they decided to sell their larger house in 2021 and downsize, the move into my rental had been presented as temporary. They wanted something smaller without immediately buying again. I had an empty month between tenants. Letting them use the place seemed obvious. Temporary became convenient. Convenient became normal. They paid me about $1,050 a month, plus some utilities. Even then, It was below market. As rents climbed, I left theirs almost untouched. I covered the taxes, insurance, major repairs, a water heater, a garage door motor, and the difference between what the house could have earned and what I accepted from my parents. I had never called that difference a gift. Calling it a gift would have required admitting I was giving something. Instead, I told myself the arrangement barely counted because they were family. Denise did not comment on any of that. She only nodded and asked to see a copy of the occupancy agreement when I had time. I told her it was month to month with a 60-day termination provision. She said that made the timeline easier to plan, but she still wanted everything handled cleanly. No surprise interior showings. No assuming that ownership let me walk through whenever I wanted. No rushing the people living there because emotions were high. That's what I want, I said, and I meant it. I was angry, but I did not want to make my parents homeless. I did not want to frighten two people in their 70s with a manufactured emergency. I wanted the arrangement to end in a way that could survive daylight. Denise closed her folio. Before she left, she said she would send me a market comparison and a list of next steps. We could prepare the property around the notice period, instead of pretending the occupants did not exist. I thanked her and watched her drive away. My parents' curtains moved in the front window. For the first time, I understood that owning the house had never been the confusing part. Everyone involved knew whose name was on the paperwork. The confusion had happened somewhere else. 5 years of they had gone from living in my property to thinking of it as the permanent family center. And because I had rarely corrected the language, I had helped make that transformation invisible. My phone rang before I reached my car. Mom. I let it ring. It rang again, while I was pulling away from the curb. Then Dad called. Then Mom again. I waited until I was home and Lucy was upstairs talking to a friend before I called them back. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the kitchen table, not because I wanted a performance, but because I did not want to pace around my house the way I used to when they were upset with me. Sitting still felt like a small act of discipline, Mom answered. Dad was beside her. My mother began with a softened version of the doorstep conversation. She said she had slept badly. She said she wished I had not left so suddenly. She said she understood that Lucy's feelings were hurt, but she hoped I could see how exhausting Christmas was for the person hosting it. She reminded me that Lucy had always loved helping in the kitchen. I told her I knew Lucy had liked helping. That was not the issue. Dad cut in to say he had only meant that visiting children should be served first. I asked whether Lucy had eaten with the family after serving them. There was a pause. Mom said I was reducing a whole holiday to one moment. I almost followed her into that argument. I could feel the old machinery starting inside me, the urge to explain until she agreed with me. Then I remembered Lucy in the car, asking whether she should have waited longer. So I stopped. The housing arrangement is ending, I said. You'll receive the written notice under our agreement. It gives you 60 days. Denise is starting the listing process, but nothing is closing tomorrow and nobody is being put out on the street. Dad's chair scraped on their floor. You don't get to use that house to discipline us. There it was. Not our house. That house. A tiny change in language caused by pressure. I'm not disciplining you. What do you call this? Ending an arrangement I no longer want to continue. Mom inhaled sharply. Claire, listen to yourself. I did. For once, that did not scare me. She said I had another home. She said they had built a life there. She said they hosted the family there, because the house gave everyone a place to gather. She talked about the dining room, the backyard, the guest room, the way Dad had organized the garage. None of those things were false. They had lived there. They had made memories there. I was not trying to erase that, but none of it turned occupancy into ownership. I told them again that I would honor the 60 days and coordinate everything properly. If they wanted help finding a smaller place, I could send options when they were ready. Dad said they were not ready because they were not moving. Mom was quieter. That bothered me more. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Then she asked, "Have you listed it already?" "No. Have you signed anything?" "Not a listing agreement yet." Her exhale was audible. Relief. Not grief. Not even anger. Relief. It sharpened the same question I had felt on the porch. She was measuring how reversible this was. "Then don't do anything else until we talk in person," she said. "We are talking." "That's not what I mean." I waited. She did not explain. Dad told me we could discuss it after everyone had calmed down. I said there was nothing I needed to calm down before deciding how to use property I owned. He told me I was being cold. I ended the call before we could spend another 20 minutes choosing new words for the same disagreement. Less than an hour later, Amanda called. Her name on the screen surprised me. My sister was not someone who usually volunteered for the middle of a conflict. Growing up, she had been better at sensing where our parents' approval was flowing and standing slightly downstream. As adults, we were not estranged, but we were not intimate either. We exchanged birthday gifts, coordinated holidays, and talked more about the children than about ourselves. Since her separation, I had known she was under pressure. I had offered help a few times, and she had accepted the practical things without discussing much of what was happening between her and her husband. When I answered, she skipped hello. "Are you really selling Mom and Dad's house?" The wording hit me immediately. "It's my house. I know that now." Now. I pulled out a chair and sat down. "What do you mean now?" Amanda was breathing fast, like she had been moving around while talking. In the background, I heard a cabinet close, and then Chloe asked something from another room. Amanda told her she would be there in a minute, waited until the noise faded, and lowered her voice. "Mom called me." I did not ask what Mom had said. Amanda was already telling me. She said our parents had told her the realtor visit was my response to Christmas. Then Patricia had said something else, apparently expecting it to prove how unreasonable I was being. She had reminded Amanda that she and the children were supposed to move into the house after the holidays. For a second I thought I had misunderstood the sentence. "Move into what house?" Amanda went silent. The answer was obvious, but I needed to hear whether we were both standing in the same reality. Mom and Dad's place. My property. "Claire, please don't do that right now." "Do what?" "Talk like I'm trying to steal something from you." "I'm trying to understand what they told you." Her voice changed. The anger was still there, but fear had moved underneath it. Amanda explained that after she and her husband separated, she had started looking at what she could afford on one income, while keeping Chloe and Owen in the same school area. Our parents had told her not to lock herself into another expensive lease. They had said she and the kids could come stay with them after the holiday period, get through the rest of the school year, save money, and decide what came next. I pressed my fingertips against the table. "Did they tell you they asked me?" Another silence. "No." "Did they tell you they needed to ask me?" "No." Amanda sounded less certain now, but not apologetic. She had taken their promise seriously. Her townhouse lease was nearing its end. She had already told the landlord she did not plan to renew. She had started sorting what could go into storage and what the children would need right away. Chloe had apparently been talking about whether she could paint one of the bedrooms. Owen wanted to know if Grandpa would let him keep his bike in the garage. This was not a casual suggestion thrown out over coffee. My parents had allowed my sister to build an actual transition plan around a house they did not own. I closed my eyes. The moral ground under the problem shifted. I was still the owner. That had not changed. But now 2 children had expectations. Amanda had a lease clock. My decision no longer affected only the people who had been sitting at that Christmas table telling Lucy to wait. "I didn't know," I said. Amanda gave a humorless laugh. "Well, I didn't know you were going to sell it." "That's not what I mean. I didn't know they offered it to you." She went quiet again. I asked when this had started. She told me our parents had been discussing it with her for weeks. Not in legal. They talked as though the house were simply available because they lived there. Mom had described which rooms made sense. She had said Amanda could use the larger spare bedroom and the kids could work out the other spaces. Dad had talked about reorganizing part of the garage. The more Amanda said, the colder I felt. Not because she wanted help, because my parents had made a plan with my property and left me out of the plan completely. Finally, Amanda said, "I get that the deed is in your name. It's more than the deed. I know. You bought it." There was reluctance in the admission. She had known the broad facts, just not understood that they mattered. Then they couldn't promise it to you. They shouldn't have promised it without talking to you, she said. Fine, but that doesn't mean you have to blow everything up. There was the second shift. The factual question had changed. Amanda no longer believed our parents had authority to give her the house. The moral question had not changed at all. She reminded me that I had my own home. She said Mom and Dad had lived there for years. She said her children had already been through enough with the separation. She asked what I expected her to do with 2 kids and a lease ending while I sold a place no one was forcing me to sell. I listened because, unlike my parents' argument about Christmas, Amanda's problem was real. She had made decisions based on information she thought was reliable. That did not make the promise valid, but it did mean my boundary had a cost for someone who had not created the original arrangement. "I'm not going to cancel the sale," I said. She made a small sound of disbelief. "But I will help you look at rentals. You still have time before your lease ends. I can send you places near the school and your work. If you need moving contacts, I'll send those too." "That's your solution?" "It's the help I can offer without giving you a house I never agreed to give." "I didn't ask you to give me a house." "No, Mom did it for you." The sentence landed hard. Amanda was quiet long enough that I regretted the sharpness, but not the truth. When she spoke again, she said, "You are making this about ownership because ownership is the part you can win." I looked at my kitchen window. Snowmelt ran in thin lines down the glass. "I'm making it about consent." She did not answer. I could hear Chloe again in the background, asking whether she could have a snack. Amanda told her yes, then came back to me with her voice lower. She said I could believe whatever I wanted about Mom and Dad. She agreed they should have talked to me, but she still thought I was choosing a principle over people at the exact moment her family was unstable. I told her I understood that she thought that. I did not try to make her approve. That was new for me too. Then Amanda said something almost as an afterthought. Mom had this whole idea that it would be easy. She said Lucy's already there all the time, so the kids wouldn't be starting from scratch. I sat straighter. "What does Lucy have to do with where you live?" "I don't know. She was talking about routines, the kids knowing the house, family around." Amanda sounded impatient, as if I had grabbed the least important part of the conversation. Then she added, "Mom already told Chloe that Lucy would help her after school." Everything in me went still. Amanda mistook my silence for another argument about the house. I was no longer thinking about the house. I asked Amanda what exactly Mom had told Chloe. Not what she had told Amanda about rent or bedrooms or getting through the school year. I wanted the part that involved my daughter. Amanda sighed. "Claire, I don't know every word. Mom said Chloe wouldn't have to worry about being the new kid in a new routine because Lucy already knew how everything worked over there." "How? What worked?" "I don't know. Homework. Dinner. Getting picked up. The house." There was enough vagueness in her answer that I could have decided I was hearing danger because I had become sensitive to it. 3 days earlier, I probably would have. I would have told myself that 12-year-olds helped 10-year-olds with homework all the time, that cousins spent afternoons together, that my mother liked to speak as if every family event had an operating manual, because that was simply who she was. But I had just watched Lucy apologize for trying to sit down at Christmas dinner. I did not want to turn one clue into a verdict. I also did not want to explain it away. "So what happens now?" Amanda asked. Her question pulled us back to the part of the problem she could see clearly. I meant what I said. I'll help you find another rental. I'm not talking about rental listings. Mom and Dad still have 60 days, right? Yes. Then I can move some things in while they're still there. I thought I had misheard her. Move things where? To the house. Amanda, don't say my name like that. I'm not talking about changing the locks and taking over. I'm talking about boxes. Maybe the kids' winter stuff. Things I don't want to move twice. I sat back in my chair. The fact that she could say it so practically told me how real the plan had become in her mind. To Amanda, the sale was still a decision I might reverse. Mom and Dad were still physically in the house. Their 60 days looked, to her, like 60 days in which the promise remained alive. You can't start moving into the property, I said. They live there. They have the right to live there, under the agreement. They do not have the right to add another household because they promised you they could. You're really going to police boxes now? No, I'm telling you before you rent a truck and make this worse. She went quiet, and I could hear the offense in the silence. This was the kind of moment where the old version of me would have softened the sentence until it barely meant anything. I would have said we should wait and see, or maybe talk after New Year's, or that I did not want anyone making decisions too quickly. Then Amanda would have heard possibility, Mom would have heard hesitation, and Dad would have heard surrender. Instead, I told her the truth in one piece. My parents' remaining 60 days did not give them authority to turn a 2-person occupancy into a 5-person one. I was not agreeing to Amanda and the children moving in before the sale. If she needed storage, I would help her compare storage units. If she needed another set of hands for a move, I would help arrange it. But the house was not a bridge she could begin crossing, just because Mom and Dad were still standing on the other side. Amanda did not yell. She sounded tired, which was harder to defend against. I already told the kids, she said. I know. No, I don't think you do. Chloe has been drawing where she wants her desk. Owen told his teacher he might be living closer to Grandpa. I closed my eyes for a second. Those details did not change the answer. They changed the cost of giving it. I'm sorry they were told before anyone asked me. That's a very careful sentence. It's also the true one. What am I supposed to tell them? That the plan changed because the adults who offered the house weren't in a position to offer it. You want me to say that about Mom and Dad? I want you to tell them something that doesn't make me the person who took away a house they were never actually promised by me. She let out a long breath. For a moment I thought she might hang up. Instead, she said she had to get Chloe to a friend's house and would call later. Before she ended the call, she said, I still think you're wrong. I know. And I'm still going to look at what my options are. Good. The word surprised both of us. I meant it. Amanda taking even one step that did not depend on me changing my mind was better than another day spent waiting for a family promise to become legally or magically true. After we hung up, I opened the email from Denise that had arrived while Amanda and I were talking. It contained a market comparison, a proposed sequence for preparing the house, and a reminder that the first real step on my side was not a sign in the yard. It was clean notice to the people living there. The agreement was simple. 60 days written notice. We had signed it when they moved in because I believed even family housing needed clear terms. I had never expected those terms to matter. Now, they did. I drafted the notice that afternoon and sent it exactly the way the agreement required, then arranged for a hard copy as well. I kept the tone dry. Property address. Date. 60-day termination of the month-to-month occupancy arrangement. Rent due as usual through the end of occupancy. Coordination for any later interior access with reasonable notice. No mention of Christmas. No mention of Lucy. No accusation. I read it twice before sending, not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to know whether taking the emotion out of the page changed the decision. It did not. The hardest part of boundaries, I was learning, was that they could look almost boring once they were written down. My father called less than 10 minutes after the email landed. He did not say hello. You sent us a notice. Yes. Withdraw it. No. There was a pause so clean I could picture him standing in the kitchen with the paper in one hand, waiting for the world to restore itself. Your mother and I are not moving because you had a bad Christmas. I rested my hand flat on the desk. This is the notice required by the agreement. I know what it is. Then you know the date. Don't talk to me like I work for you. That sentence carried more of my childhood in it than he probably knew. Dad had spent 30 years supervising maintenance crews and facilities staff. He believed in procedures when he was the person explaining them. He respected schedules when he set them. He liked rules because rules usually came with someone authorized to enforce them, and he had spent most of his life assuming authority naturally moved toward him. I did not need to defeat that belief in a phone call. I'm not asking you to like it, I said. I'm telling you what happens next. Nothing happens next until we sit down as a family. The old command voice was back. I heard it. But for the first time, I also heard what was missing behind it. There was no mechanism. Dad could refuse the conversation. He could say the notice was insulting. He could tell Mom he would not pack a single box. None of that turned 60 days into forever. I told him Denise would coordinate any future property access with notice, and that I would not show up unexpectedly. They had time. They could choose where to go. I was willing to help them look when they were ready. We're not looking. Then I won't send you listings yet. He went silent again. I had not argued with the premise that he could refuse. I had simply removed myself from making that refusal workable. Mom came on the line. Her strategy was different. She asked whether I understood what moving at their age involved. She mentioned furniture, medications, doctors, winter weather, the trouble of changing addresses. None of those concerns were fake. That was the complication with my mother. She rarely invented a burden. She gathered real burdens and arranged them until somebody else felt morally obligated to carry all of them. I told her 60 days gave us time to plan. I would help with practical relocation. I would not withdraw the notice. She asked if Denise had told me how long a sale might take. Yes. Then why rush us? I'm not rushing you. You started this the day after Christmas. I started the sale the day after Christmas. You still have the transition period we agreed to years ago. She said the word agreed, as if I had chosen it to humiliate her. Then she asked whether Amanda had spoken to me. There it was again. Not. Are you sure? Not. Can we repair Christmas? Amanda. Yes, I said. And? And I told her she can't move into the house. Mom's tone changed immediately. Claire. Not loud, not shocked, warning. She has nowhere settled. She has a townhouse until her lease ends, and she has time to find another rental. She made decisions because we told her she could come here. I know. You're punishing her for something she didn't do. I'm not punishing Amanda. I'm refusing a housing arrangement I never agreed to. Mom told me that distinction might make sense on paper, but not in a family. She said people had already planned around the assumption that the house would remain available. She said I was treating 5 years of family life like a commercial tenancy because I was angry. I almost answered with the amount of rent I had left on the table over those 5 years. I almost reminded her who had paid for the water heater, the roof repair, the property taxes. I did not. Money was not the thing I needed her to understand yet. I'm not changing the notice, I said. She exhaled hard through her nose. You always think if you put something in writing, that makes it right. No, it makes it clear. I ended the call soon after that. For the rest of the afternoon, I worked on ordinary things. Laundry, grocery list. A payroll correction I had promised one of my managers I would check before Monday. The normal tasks helped, because they did not care that my father was furious, or my mother thought I was dismantling the family. A number either reconciled, or it did not. A towel was either dry, or it was not. Lucy came downstairs. Around 4, carrying a mug with hot chocolate powder still clinging to the rim. She asked whether Grandma had called. I told her yes. Is she mad? Yes. Lucy looked down. I stopped myself before adding that Grandma would get over it. I did not know that. More importantly, I was beginning to understand how often adults told children that other people's emotions would improve if everyone just waited long enough and behaved carefully enough. Her feelings are hers to handle, I said instead. Lucy frowned slightly at the sentence, but she nodded. I did not ask her about after-school plans then. Not yet. I had one vague comment from Amanda, and too much anger in my own system. I did not want to put a question in Lucy's mouth, and then congratulate myself when she gave me the answer I expected. So I waited. Over the next 2 days, the house moved from family argument to actual process. Denise and I signed the listing agreement. She scheduled the work that could be done without entering the house, and gave my parents notice before anything that would eventually require interior access. We agreed not to rush photographs until after the first week, partly because the holiday decorations were still everywhere, and partly because I wanted the rules around access to be so clean that no one could honestly claim I was using ownership to invade their home. Dad hated that the process kept moving without his permission. He sent me one message saying there would be no sign in the yard. I replied that Denise and I would handle marketing decisions and would give them notice of anything affecting their use of the property. He did not answer. That silence felt different from mine at Christmas. Mine had been a choice to leave an argument. His was the first sign that he had discovered there was no sentence strong enough to stop a process he did not control. Amanda called again on the third day. She had been looking at rentals. Though she made sure I understood this did not mean she agreed with me. One place was too far from the children's school. Another required a deposit she could manage, but did not want to lose if Mom convinced me to change course. A third was smaller than the townhouse but near her office. Then she asked if I had reconsidered letting her store things at the house. No. What if it's just in the garage? No. Dad already said he could clear a section. That's exactly the problem. She was quiet. I told Amanda the same thing I had told her before. Dad's remaining occupancy did not let him create a new right for her. Boxes in the garage would turn a settled no into another negotiation, so the answer stayed no. Amanda did not like hearing it laid out that way, but she did not deny it either. I just hate moving things twice, she said. I know. I hate that the kids thought they knew what was happening. I know. I hate that you sound so calm. That one almost made me laugh, though nothing was funny. I'm not calm. You sound calm. I'm trying not to make every decision from the loudest feeling in the room. She let that sit. Then, as if she had decided to move on to practical details, she started telling me what Mom had planned for weekdays once Amanda and the kids moved in. At first, I listened because I thought she was explaining why the house location had seemed convenient. Chloe's school let out before Amanda's workday ended. Owen had an after-school program some days, but not all. Mom had told Amanda not to worry, because family could cover the gaps. Then Amanda said, she kept saying Lucy could help Chloe with homework. I stopped writing down the address of the rental Amanda had just mentioned. How often? I don't know. Amanda, I really don't. We didn't make a schedule. What else? She hesitated and I heard a shift in her breathing. Mom said if I worked late, the kids wouldn't be alone. She and Dad would be there. Lucy's close by. You're close by. Did she say I would be there? Not exactly. What did she say? That everybody would help. That it would be easy because the kids already know the routine. What routine? Amanda gave an impatient sigh. Claire. She plans everything. Dinner at a certain time. Homework before screens. Shoes by the back door. You know Mom? Yes, I knew Mom. That was why the next sentence mattered. Amanda continued. She said Lucy could show them how Grandma likes things done. My pen was still in my hand. I looked at it without seeing it. There was nothing monstrous in those words by themselves. A grandmother could say them about where cereal bowls went, or when homework got finished. A cousin could help another cousin without being exploited. A 12-year-old could enjoy being older, capable, useful. That was exactly why I had missed so much before Christmas. Every piece could defend itself alone. I asked Amanda whether Mom had talked about Lucy staying after school regularly. She said Lucy was already around a lot. That's not what I asked. I don't know what regularly means to you. It means, did Mom talk like Lucy was part of the childcare plan? Amanda was silent for several seconds. I guess, she said finally. A little. A little. The phrase landed like one spoon, one pitcher, one basket of rolls, small enough to excuse. I set my pen down. Did Lucy know any of this? I assumed she did. Why? Because Mom talked about her like she did. That answer was worse than a yes. If Patricia had been making plans around Lucy in rooms Claire owned, promising Lucy's time to help Amanda's children, and treating Lucy's participation as settled enough that Amanda never thought to ask whether the child had agreed, then Christmas had not been the whole problem. It might not even have been the beginning. I did not tell Amanda that. Not yet. I asked only for facts. Had Mom assigned specific days? Amanda did not remember. Had Lucy ever directly agreed in front of her? Amanda could not think of a time. Had Chloe been told to expect Lucy's help? Yes, apparently more than once. Had Dad discussed it? Mostly the physical arrangement. Garage space, bedrooms, where everyone would put things. He seemed to treat Mom's plan as the family plan. The conversation ended with Amanda telling me again that she still needed to solve housing before her lease ran out. I told her to send me the 3 rentals she was considering. I would look at them with her if she wanted. Why are you helping me if you think I'm part of this? She asked. I don't think you created it. She was quiet. And, I added, helping you find your own place is not the same as agreeing that Mom can give you mine. She did not thank me. I did not need her to. After we hung up, I sat at my dining table for several minutes without moving. The house now had a date attached to it. My parents had 60 days. Amanda had been told she could not start moving in. Denise had a real listing process underway. Dad's authority had collided with something he could not simply overrule. All of that should have been enough to occupy me. It wasn't. I kept hearing Amanda's phrases. Lucy could help Chloe with homework. Lucy was close by. Lucy could show them how Grandma liked things done. Every sentence sounded almost harmless until I placed it beside the Christmas chair. I walked upstairs. Lucy was on the floor of her room, sorting colored pencils into a tin, one leg folded under her. A half-finished drawing of a fox lay beside her. She looked up when I knocked on the open door. Can I ask you something? Okay. I sat on the edge of her desk chair, instead of beside her on the floor. I wanted to give her space. I also wanted to keep my voice neutral enough that she did not start searching my face for the answer I preferred. For a moment I considered asking whether Grandma had been making her work too much. I did not. That question already contained a conclusion. So I asked the one thing I actually needed to know. When Grandma talked about Aunt Amanda moving in, what did she say you would do? Lucy's face changed in a way I was not prepared for. Not fear. Pride. She said I'd finally be old enough to be her right hand. Her pride frightened me more than fear would have. Lucy looked down at the colored pencils in her lap and smiled a little, as if she had finally been invited to explain something good. Grandma said I'm old enough now. She said when Aunt Amanda and the kids move in, she'll need somebody who already knows how everything works. I kept my hands folded because I did not trust them not to tighten. What does being her right hand mean? Lucy shrugged. But it was the shrug of a child who thought the answer was obvious. She said Grandma had told her she could help Chloe with homework because Chloe listened to her better than adults sometimes. She could show Owen where snacks were kept and remind him to put his shoes by the back door. If Amanda worked late, Lucy could stay for a little while and help keep the kids busy. She could set the table, learn more of Grandma's recipes, carry things in when dinner was ready, and make sure everyone knew the routine. None of it came out sounding like a punishment. That was what made it so hard to hear. Lucy described each responsibility as if Patricia had handed her another badge. Mature, dependable, trusted, old enough. My mother had taken the ordinary pride of a 12-year-old who wanted adults to see her as capable and built a role out of it, one compliment at a time. "Did Grandma ask if you wanted to do all that?" I asked. Lucy frowned. "I do want to help." "That's not exactly what I asked." She pushed 3 blue pencils into a neat row before answering. "She said I'd be good at it." I waited. Lucy glanced up at me. "And I am good at it." There was a little challenge in her voice now. I recognized it. She thought I was questioning her competence. In her mind, I was taking away something she had earned. "I know you are," I said. "You're good at a lot of things." "Then why are you looking like that?" I had not realized my face was giving me away. I leaned back in the chair and tried to answer without turning my mother into a villain in front of the granddaughter who still loved her. Patricia had made choices I was furious about, but Lucy's relationship with her had contained real warmth too. The metal measuring cups were real. So were the recipes, the jokes in the kitchen, the afternoons they had spent making cookies that came out slightly burned around the edges because they both forgot the last tray. If I told Lucy all of that affection had been fake, I would be lying to make the problem easier to explain. "I'm trying to understand what Grandma expected from you," I said. Lucy's shoulders relaxed a little. She said Patricia had started calling her my right hand months earlier, first as a joke while they cooked. Over time, the phrase followed her outside the kitchen to groceries, misplaced glasses, holiday decorations because she was careful and dependable. I asked only enough questions to see the shape of it. I did not need a catalog of every favor my daughter had ever done. Capability earned praise. Praise brought more responsibility. And Lucy became more eager to be the person Grandma could count on. "Was Christmas different?" I asked. Lucy twisted a pencil between her fingers. "I guess it was busier." "Did Grandma tell you before everyone came that you would be helping?" "She always tells me what she needs." "Did she tell Chloe and Owen what they would be helping with?" That question stopped the pencil. Lucy thought about it. "They don't know where stuff goes." I did not press. The answer was enough. The old explanations were still available if I wanted them. Lucy was older. She lived closer. She knew the house. She enjoyed helping. Chloe and Owen were younger and visited less. Every fact could be true at the same time. The problem was what happened when those facts were used to decide, without asking, which child would sit and which child would keep working. I looked at the fox on Lucy's floor. She had colored one ear and left the other blank. One half looked finished. The other looked like a promise. "Tell me about when Aunt Amanda moved in," I said. "What did Grandma say would change?" Lucy brightened again, though more cautiously now. Patricia had apparently been talking about the move, as if it were already settled. She had told Lucy there would be more people in the house, so everyone would have to be organized. Chloe might need help with schoolwork. Owen would need to learn where things belonged. Amanda's work hours might mean dinner happened before she got home some nights. Grandma said Lucy already knew how to keep things running and could show the younger kids what to do. "Keep things running," I repeated. Lucy nodded. "She says I'm good at noticing what needs done." I had to look away for a second. That sentence belonged to me. Not the exact words, the habit. I had spent most of my adult life walking into rooms and noticing what needed done before anyone asked. A bill was late. I handled it. Dad needed help comparing insurance forms. I handled it. Mom needed someone to bring a dish, arrive early, stay late, pick something up, call somebody back, smooth over a disagreement. I handled it. I had always told myself I was simply competent. Competence had become an invitation for everyone else to stop asking whether the responsibility was mine. And now my daughter sounded proud of learning the same trick. I did not tell her that. The realization was mine to carry, not hers. Instead, I asked, "What if you didn't feel like helping one day?" Lucy stared at me like I had asked what would happen if she stopped brushing her teeth. "I would still help. What if you had homework? I could do it there. What if you wanted to go to a friend's house?" She hesitated. "I could go another day." "What if you were tired?" Another pause. Then she said, "Grandma would probably really need me if I was supposed to be there." That was the moment the whole thing changed for me. That answer changed the meaning of Christmas. A 12-year-old had already learned that when her own needs collided with Grandma needing her, her needs were supposed to move. Christmas had not created that belief. It had displayed it. The cousins had sat while Lucy kept the room running, the first public rehearsal of the role Patricia expected her to keep. Patricia would have called it responsibility, family, and the dignity of being needed. I moved from the desk chair to the floor, so we were closer to eye level. Lucy watched me carefully now. She knew the conversation had turned serious, even if she did not know why. "You are not responsible for Aunt Amanda's childcare," I said. "You are not responsible for Grandma's house. You are not responsible for making dinner run smoothly because more people move in. You can help with things because you want to. But nobody gets to build a schedule around you without asking me, and without asking you." Lucy blinked. "I want to help Chloe." "You can help Chloe." "Then what are we talking about?" "We're talking about the difference between helping sometimes and being counted on like you already agreed to a job." "It's not a job." Her voice sharpened. It was the first time she sounded defensive of Patricia, instead of embarrassed by Christmas. "I know Grandma doesn't pay you," I said. "That isn't what I mean. You keep making it sound bad." I stopped. She was right about one thing. I had to be careful not to make every kindness suspect, just because I had finally seen how kindness could be used. If Lucy started believing that helping anyone was dangerous, I would only replace one bad lesson with another. So I changed the question. "If Grandma asked you to help Chloe with math one afternoon and you wanted to, would that be okay with you?" "Yes." "If she told Aunt Amanda you would be available every afternoon without asking you first, would that feel the same?" Lucy took longer this time. "No," she said, but softly. "If Grandma asked you to set the table while everyone else helped with something too, that's fine. If everyone else sat down and you were told you could eat later because you were the responsible one?" Her face tightened. No, I did not say anything else for a few seconds. She had reached the distinction herself. I wanted to leave room around it. Then she picked up the fox drawing and began coloring the second ear with a brown pencil. Grandma didn't mean Christmas like that. I could have argued. I could have reminded her of the exact words. Instead, I said, "Maybe she didn't think about how it would feel to you. But it happened. And I'm going to make sure it doesn't become normal." Lucy pressed too hard and broke the pencil tip. She stared at it, annoyed. "So I can't go over there anymore?" "That's not what I said. Can I cook with Grandma?" "Yes." "Can I help her?" "Yes, if you want to." "Can I help Chloe?" "Yes, if it's actually your choice and it doesn't become something everybody assumes you'll do." Her frustration came out in a rush. How am I supposed to know when helping is okay now? That question was more useful than any speech I could have given her. "You don't have to know perfectly," I said. "You can ask yourself whether you were asked or assigned. Whether you can say no without someone making you feel guilty. Whether helping means you still get to be a kid too." Lucy looked down again. "Grandma is proud of me." The sentence was not really an argument. It was the thing she was afraid of losing. "I'm proud of you too." "That's different." "I know." She looked at me, surprised that I did not challenge it. Grandma's approval was different. Patricia had made competence feel like a private bond between them. Lucy knew where the serving platters lived. Chloe did not. Lucy knew how Patricia folded dish towels. Owen did not. Lucy knew which recipe card had the corrected amount of cinnamon written in the margin. Those details made her feel chosen. If I ripped that identity away overnight, she would not experience it as protection. She would experience it as loss. So, I told her we were not deciding everything that night. I told her I wanted one rule for now. If Grandma talked to her about regular babysitting, after-school responsibilities, dinner duties, or anything else involving Amanda moving in, Lucy was not to agree to a plan on her own. She could tell Grandma she had to check with me. Lucy did not like the rule. I could see that immediately. But she'll think I'm being a baby. No, she'll know you're 12. That's worse. A laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Lucy almost smiled, then remembered she was irritated with me and looked away. I let that be enough for the night. Over the next week, I tried not to turn our house into an investigation room. Lucy went back to school. I went back to work. Denise moved ahead with the listing preparation in the narrow windows allowed by the notice schedule. My parents cooperated with exterior work and resisted almost everything that required admitting the sale was real. Amanda continued looking at rentals, while still making it clear she thought I was forcing everyone into unnecessary difficulty. The family system had not collapsed. It had simply become visible. That visibility changed small things. When Lucy offered to unload the dishwasher one evening, I caught myself studying the offer as if it needed analysis. Then I stopped. She lived in our home. She had chores. That was normal. The point was not to raise a child who never carried a plate. The point was to raise one who understood that carrying a plate did not buy her a place at the table. 3 days after our conversation, Patricia texted me asking if Lucy could come over Saturday to bake bread. Before Christmas, I would have said yes without thinking. This time I asked Lucy first. She wanted to go. I said yes, but I also called my mother before confirming. I kept the conversation short. I told Patricia Lucy could visit to bake. I also told her there would be no planning with Lucy about Amanda's childcare, household schedules, or future responsibilities. Any arrangement involving Lucy's regular time would come through me first. There was silence on the line. Then my mother said, "Regular responsibilities? You know what I mean." "No, Claire. I know what you seem to think I mean." I had expected denial. Instead, Patricia sounded almost offended by the idea that there was something improper to deny. She said Lucy was mature for her age. She said Chloe looked up to her. She said Amanda would need support while getting back on her feet. She said there was nothing wrong with cousins helping cousins, and nothing harmful about a child learning that a household worked because people contributed. I listened without interrupting because for the first time, she was not minimizing Christmas. She was defending the structure behind it. "Did you tell Amanda that Lucy would be available after school?" I asked. I told Amanda not to panic about every little gap in the schedule. We would all be close. Things would be easier for everybody. The phrase caught my attention. Everybody. I thought of Amanda choosing rooms in a house I owned. I thought of Lucy being assigned homework help and dinner duties. I thought of Patricia standing in the center of the arrangement, deciding which person's capacity could solve which person's problem. "Did you ask Lucy if she wanted to be part of that plan?" My mother gave a tired sigh. "She likes helping me." That's not an answer. "She loves Chloe and Owen." Also, not an answer. Patricia's voice cooled. "You are taking perfectly normal family behavior and making it sound transactional. I'm asking who gets to decide Lucy's time. She's 12. You decide everything for her anyway." The irony was so clean, I nearly missed it. "Yes," I said. "I'm her parent. That is why I'm telling you not to make recurring childcare or household plans with her without me." My mother was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, she shifted away from Lucy and back toward the bigger family picture. Amanda was separated. The children were unsettled. The house had room. Mom and Dad were already there. Lucy was close. I was close. If everyone stopped turning ordinary help into a negotiation, Patricia said, life would be easier for all of us. There was nothing sinister in the words. That was the danger. They described a world in which every available person could be assigned to whatever problem Patricia thought most urgent. The person with a house supplied the house. The child with maturity supplied labor. The sister with a crisis received the help. And because each decision was wrapped in a real need, questioning the assignment made you look selfish. I did not explain that whole pattern to my mother. Not yet. I had learned something from the last few weeks. Naming a conclusion before the other person had to live with its consequences only gave them another sentence to argue with. So I stayed concrete. Lucy can bake with you Saturday, I said. She cannot be used to plan Amanda's childcare. If you need something regular from her, you ask me first. If Lucy says she doesn't want to do something, the answer is no. And the house sale is continuing. Patricia was silent long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call had not dropped. Then she said very calmly, "You really think you're protecting her?" It was not a question. Yes. I think you're teaching her that family is something to be suspicious of. I'm teaching her that helping is a choice. She is a child. Children need responsibility. She has responsibility. Not if you keep removing every expectation the moment she feels uncomfortable. I looked across my office at the payroll reports waiting on my second monitor. My entire workday was built around expectations, deadlines, rules, accountability. Responsibility itself was not the problem, and I would not let my mother drag me into pretending it was. Being responsible is not the same as being available whenever someone else decides you should be, I said. Patricia did not answer immediately. When she did, her voice had softened again. "Claire, someday Lucy is going to need family too. I hope she has family when she needs it. Then maybe don't teach her to keep score so early." There it was, the old moral pressure, dressed as concern for the future. I did not take the bait. "I've told you the boundary," she breathed out slowly. "Fine." The word did not sound like agreement. It sounded like someone setting something down temporarily because she had decided pushing harder would not help. We ended the call without resolving anything. I sat there for a minute afterward, looking at my phone. The call settled one thing I had still been testing. Patricia did not think the arrangement was a mistake. She thought it was sensible. So the sale and the boundary around Lucy would continue. That evening, Lucy was doing homework at the kitchen counter when I told her Grandma had asked about Saturday. Her face lifted immediately. "Can I go?" "Yes." The relief on her face told me I had been right not to turn the boundary into a punishment. Then I added, "Remember what we talked about. If Grandma starts making plans for you about Aunt Amanda or the kids, you tell her you need to check with me." Lucy's pencil stopped. "Mom, I know you don't like it. She's going to think I told you stuff." "You did tell me stuff. You're allowed to talk to me." "That's not what I mean." I understood. Lucy did not want Patricia to think she had betrayed their private bond. The right-hand role had made her feel older, special, included in adult confidence. My boundary threatened not only the work, but the intimacy attached to it. "I'm not going to tell Grandma you complained," I said. "Because you didn't. You answered my questions." Lucy looked down at her worksheet. "I still don't think she was doing anything bad." "You don't have to agree with me tonight." She looked up quickly. That answer surprised her. I did not need Lucy to understand every boundary before I protected it. "You can love Grandma," I said. "You can miss being her helper. You can even be mad at me. The rule still stands." Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. "It feels like you're taking something away." "I know." This time I did not rush to convince her otherwise. Sometimes protection felt like loss before it felt like safety. I let her finish homework without turning the moment into another lesson. Later that night, after the dishes were done and Lucy had gone upstairs, I checked the listing schedule Denise had sent. The house was not yet under contract. Photos would happen after proper notice. Showings would come after that. There was still time for my parents to believe I would change my mind. I suspected Patricia did. Not because she thought she owned the house, because she still believed she understood me. For 43 years, being disappointed in me had usually been enough to make me fix something. A sharper tone, a quiet sigh, a reminder that Amanda needed help. A sentence about family that had been the tool set. My mother had not needed threats, because guilt was cheaper and usually worked faster. Now the house was moving anyway. Lucy's time was no longer available by assumption. And for the first time, Patricia had lost 2 parts of the system at once. I was putting my phone on the charger when I heard Lucy call from the hallway. "Mom?" She stood at the top of the stairs in her pajamas, phone in one hand. "What is it?" She did not answer. She came down 3 steps and held the screen toward me. A message from Grandma had just appeared. "Can I talk to you for just a minute, sweetheart? None of this is your fault." I read the message twice before I looked at Lucy. She was still standing 3 steps above me, one hand wrapped around the railing and the other holding out her phone. Her face had gone careful in that way. Children's faces do when they are trying to decide which adult is about to become angry. "Did you answer?" I asked. She shook her head, held out my hand. "Come sit with me." We went into the living room. I did not take the phone from her. That mattered. The boundary I had set was not that Lucy could no longer receive a message from her grandmother. It was that Patricia could not build plans around my daughter without me. I wanted Lucy to learn that protection did not mean somebody stronger automatically took control of everything. She sat at the far end of the couch and looked down at the screen again. "She says it's not my fault." "I see that. Can I call her?" Every instinct in me said no. It was late. Patricia had ended our conversation only hours earlier after I told her she could not make recurring plans with Lucy. Now, she had gone straight to the person the boundary was meant to protect. But I also knew what an immediate no would feel like to Lucy. It would feel like proof that I had turned her grandmother into an enemy and expected her to do the same. "You can talk to her," I said. "But I'm staying here." Lucy's mouth tightened. "That's weird." "Probably. She'll know you don't trust her." "I'm not asking you to pretend I do." That earned me a frustrated look, but she tapped the call button. Patricia answered almost immediately. Her voice came through soft and warm, nothing like the clipped tone she had used with me earlier. She asked if Lucy was okay. She said she hated knowing Christmas had upset her. She said adults had gotten too emotional and let a small family misunderstanding become something much bigger than it needed to be. I sat in the armchair across from Lucy and said nothing. At first, Patricia stayed on safe ground. She talked about the bread they had planned to bake. She reminded Lucy of a recipe they had been trying to get right. Lucy relaxed by degrees. Her shoulders came down. She smiled once when Patricia joked about Grandpa eating the first loaf before it cooled. Then my mother changed direction so gently that, if I had not been listening for it, I might have missed the turn. She said Grandma and Grandpa were trying to figure out where they would live if the house sold. She said Aunt Amanda was still trying to find somewhere for Chloe and Owen. She said everybody was worried, and none of that was Lucy's responsibility. Lucy glanced at me. Patricia continued. She said the whole family had been happy in that house for years. She said the cousins had been excited about living closer. She said sometimes grown-ups made big decisions when they were hurt and then regretted them later. I stood. Lucy looked up sharply. I did not interrupt. I only moved closer. Then Patricia asked, in the same tender voice she used when Lucy had a fever, "You don't want us to lose our family home, do you?" Lucy's face changed. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. Her eyebrows pulled together, her lips parted. She looked at me, as if the correct answer had suddenly become dangerous, no matter which direction she chose. "Grandma!" "I know, sweetheart. I know you never meant for any of this to happen. You were hurt. Your mother got protective. Aunt Amanda and the kids may have nowhere familiar to go now, but nobody blames you." I reached for the phone. Lucy pulled it toward her chest. That stopped me harder than if Patricia had shouted. My daughter was protecting the conversation. "Mom," she whispered. I lowered my hand. Patricia must have heard her. "Claire's there?" "Yes." There was a brief pause. My mother did not apologize for contacting Lucy. She did not ask whether I wanted to join the conversation. She simply shifted tone again. "Well," she said. "Then your mother can hear me say it too. None of this is your fault, Lucy." The sentence was technically kind. The structure around it was not. If a child was told repeatedly that something was not her fault, while being shown all the people suffering because of what happened after she spoke, the words did not remove blame. They taught her where to place it. "I think that's enough for tonight," I said. Patricia sighed. "Claire, I'm talking to my granddaughter, and I'm ending the call." Lucy's eyes flashed. "Mom, I'm not punishing you, but this is exactly what we talked about." Patricia's voice sharpened only slightly. "I have not asked her to do anything. You asked a 12-year-old whether she wants her grandparents to lose their home. I asked her how she felt." "No. You gave her a consequence and asked whether she wanted it." Lucy's face crumpled. That was the moment I stopped caring whether Patricia agreed with my wording. I crouched in front of Lucy instead. "Hang up, please." She stared at me, breathing fast. My mother said her name softly. Lucy pressed the red button. The room went silent. For 2 or 3 seconds, she looked at the blank phone screen. Then she stood so abruptly, her knee hit the coffee table. "Why did you do that?" "Because Grandma was putting an adult problem on you. She said it wasn't my fault. She also told you everybody might lose something because of what happened. She didn't say because of me. She didn't have to." Lucy's eyes filled. "You always do that now. You decide what she means." The words landed because they were partly fair. I had been listening to Patricia through everything I had learned over the last few weeks. Lucy was listening through 12 years of being loved by her grandmother. "I can be wrong about what she means," I said. "I'm not wrong about what that conversation did to you." "What did it do to me?" "You were scared to answer her." She looked away. I let the silence stand. Finally, Lucy whispered, "They really have to move?" "Yes." "And Aunt Amanda can't go there?" "No." "And Chloe and Owen thought they were going to?" "Yes." Her lower lip trembled. "Because you're selling it." "Because I decided to end the housing arrangement." "That's the same thing." From where she stood, maybe it was. I did not reach for another explanation. Lucy went upstairs without saying goodnight. The next morning, she barely spoke over breakfast. She ate half a piece of toast, put her dish in the sink, and carried her backpack to the door, without the usual search for a missing hair tie or last-minute complaint about the weather. At the door, she stopped. "Did Grandma text you?" "Yes." "Are you mad at her?" "Yes." Lucy nodded once, as if confirming something private, and left for school. Patricia's message to me had arrived at 11:47 the previous night. "You had no right to cut off my conversation with my granddaughter." I had not answered. By 8:30 that morning, there were 2 more messages. The first said she had been trying to reassure Lucy. The second said I was turning a family disagreement into a loyalty test for a child. I read them once, then wrote back only what needed to change the next state. "Do not contact Lucy privately about the house, the sale, Amanda's housing, Christmas, or any plan that depends on Lucy's help. If you want to talk to her about ordinary things, contact me first for now. If you use her to pressure me again, contact will be more limited." My thumb hovered over the send button. The old fear came quickly. Too harsh, too formal, too controlling. What if I was becoming exactly what Mom said I was becoming? Then I pictured Lucy clutching the phone to her chest because she was afraid I would take away Grandma's approval. I sent it. Patricia did not respond for the rest of the morning. At work, I moved through payroll approvals, year-end adjustments, and the usual first-week problems after a holiday shutdown. The work helped because rules were not cruel, simply because they prevented a convenient outcome. At noon, Denise called. The listing had been live for several days. She had scheduled showings in windows my parents had received notice about, and the house had drawn more interest than either of us expected for January. She did not turn the conversation into excitement. She knew the occupants were my parents. She only gave me the useful facts. Several buyers had asked questions. One couple had returned with their agent, and another party was watching the listing while waiting on financing paperwork. "We may see an offer sooner than I thought," she said. I stared through the glass wall of my office at people carrying coffee between cubicles. Until then, the sale had still existed mostly as motion. Notice, photos, listing, showings, a process my parents could resent while privately assuming it might stop. An offer would be different. "Tell me when something is real," I said. "I will." That evening, Lucy came home quieter than the morning. She did her homework at the kitchen counter while I made chicken soup. I did not bring up Patricia. I had learned enough not to use every silence as permission for another lesson. She brought it up herself. "Is Grandma allowed to talk to me?" "Yes, but she has to ask you." "For now." "That's embarrassing." "I know. What if she just sends me something funny?" "That's fine. I'm talking about the house, and about asking you to fix adult problems." Lucy stirred the eraser crumbs beside her worksheet into a little pile with one finger. Then she asked, "If you didn't sell the house, could everything just go back?" The spoon in my hand stopped against the pot. "No." "Why not?" "Because I know things now that I didn't know before." She did not ask what things. She knew. A few minutes later, she closed her math book and began naming the jobs Grandma had talked about helping Chloe with math, keeping Owen busy if Amanda worked late, dinner, cleanup, recipes, as if proving none of them were too much. She insisted Grandma had not forced her and that she liked being trusted. Then her frustration broke through. "You keep saying I don't understand because I'm a kid. I'm saying you shouldn't have to understand all the consequences before adults protect your choices. They're going to lose the house. That is not your job to prevent. Aunt Amanda has to find somewhere else. That is not your job to solve. Grandma is upset. That is not your job to fix." Her voice broke. "Then, what is my job?" The question knocked all the air out of the room. I told her. School, friends, learning how to be a person, taking care of what was actually hers, helping sometimes because she wanted to, being 12. When she said that sounded selfish, I heard how deeply the old rule had already settled in her. I kept my voice steady. "It is not selfish to know where your responsibility ends." Lucy shook her head. Then, very softly, she said, "Can you please just not sell it?" I had known the question might come someday. Knowing did not prepare me for hearing it. She stepped closer. "Please, Mom. I'll help Grandma. I can help Chloe. I can babysit if Aunt Amanda needs it. I don't care if I eat later next time. I won't complain. I promise." For one terrible second, some primitive part of me wanted to say yes, just to make her stop looking at me that way. I understood then why my mother's system had survived so long. Giving in could feel exactly like love when the person asking was hurting. I sat down again because my knees felt weak. Lucy mistook my movement for hesitation and hurried on. She said Grandma and Grandpa would not have to move. Amanda would have somewhere to go. Chloe would not have to change plans. Everybody could stop being angry. She could still bake with Grandma and be her right hand. She could do better at Christmas next time. I let her finish. Then I said, "No." Her face emptied. Not because she had not heard me, because she had. "I'm not stopping the sale. You care more about proving a point than about them." The sentence was too adult to be entirely hers, but I did not ask where she had heard it. That would have turned the moment into an investigation. "I care about you enough to let you be angry with me." That doesn't even make sense. It doesn't have to yet. She backed away from me. "You're making it worse." "I know it feels that way. You don't know. She was right. I knew my version of the cost. She knew hers. Lucy went into the bathroom and shut the door. I did not follow. That evening, she ate in her room for the first time in years. I carried a plate up, knocked once, and left it outside when she told me she was not hungry. 20 minutes later, the plate was gone. I counted that as enough. The next few days were not dramatic. That made them harder. Lucy was polite. She did what I asked. She did not bring up the house again. She also stopped sitting at the kitchen counter while I cooked. She spent more time in her room, and when Patricia sent a harmless picture of a loaf of bread she had baked alone, Lucy showed it to me without smiling. I wanted to fix the distance. I did not know how without giving back the thing I was trying to protect, so I kept the boundaries ordinary. Patricia could text me. Robert could call me. Lucy could send Grandma a photo of a school project or answer a birthday question from a cousin. What Patricia could not do was discuss the sale or recruit Lucy into solving it. My mother called the restriction cruel. I did not debate the adjective. Amanda called once to tell me the smaller rental near her office was still available. She asked if I thought she should apply. I told her yes, if it worked for her budget and the children's school schedule. She asked whether the sale was still going forward. Yes. She sighed. I waited for another argument. Instead, she said, I figured. It was not agreement. But it was the first time she sounded as if my decision had become a condition she needed to plan around, rather than an obstacle she could wait to disappear. That mattered. 2.5 weeks after the listing went live, Denise called while I was driving home. I have something real. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot before she continued. A couple relocating from Cincinnati had submitted an offer. The price was serious. Their financing was pre-approved. They were willing to structure possession around my parents' notice period, instead of demanding an impossible quick handoff. There were ordinary inspection and financing contingencies, nothing magical or threatening. Denise had already checked the dates twice because she knew I would care more about that than a few $1,000s either way. I listened as she summarized the terms. The offer was not perfect. It was simply workable. Do I have until tomorrow? I asked. Yes. I thanked her and sat in the parked car after the call ended. Snow from the previous week had melted into dirty ridges along the edges of the lot. People pushed carts between cars. A man in a red knit cap loaded bottled water into a trunk. Nothing in the world looked like a point of no return. But I knew what signing would mean. Until I accepted, my parents could still believe the sale was a decision inside my head. Something guilt might reverse. Something a family conversation might soften. After I accepted, there would be buyers on the other side. Earnest money. Deadlines, inspection, financing, contract obligations. I would no longer be able to withdraw casually because dinner conversations became painful. I thought about calling Lucy. Then I stopped myself. She was 12. I had spent weeks telling her she was not responsible for adult housing decisions. Asking whether I should accept would only hand the decision back to her in a kinder-looking package. I drove home. Lucy was at the dining table, headphones on, drawing. She lifted one hand when I came in, but did not remove the headphones. I put groceries away and started dinner. Around 6, she took the headphones off. Grandma texted me a picture of the bread. I know. She asked if I wanted the recipe. That's okay. Lucy studied me. You're really not mad if I talk to her? No. I thought you were. I'm mad about what she did. That doesn't mean you have to stop loving her. Lucy looked down at her drawing. After a moment she said, I'm still mad at you. I know. That was all. It was not reconciliation. But it was the first honest thing between us in days that did not require either of us to pretend. After she went to bed, I opened Denise's email. I read every page of the offer. I checked the proposed dates against my parents' notice. I checked the contingencies. I checked the closing window. I sent Denise 2 questions about possession timing, and one about what would happen if inspection produced a material repair issue. She answered before 10. Nothing in the contract shortened my parents' agreed transition period. The buyers understood the occupancy timeline. If an inspection issue emerged, we would deal with it as a normal transaction problem. No one was being removed early. No one was being tricked. I signed. The electronic confirmation appeared at the top of my screen with a timestamp. For a long time, I did not move. The feeling was not triumph. It was grief with structure. The next morning, Denise confirmed the buyers had signed the final counter terms and the contract was live. Only then did I call my parents. Mom answered. Dad was close enough that I could hear the television behind her. I need to tell you something about the house, I said. Patricia's voice went guarded. What now? We received an offer. I accepted it. The buyers agreed to the existing move-out timeline. There are normal contingencies, but the house is under contract. Silence. My mother asked what I meant by under contract even though I knew she understood perfectly well. I explained once. No long real estate lecture. A buyer had made a serious offer. I had accepted. The sale now had contractual obligations and a real closing path. Then Dad came on the line. He did not sound angry. That was what I noticed first. He sounded as if somebody had removed a step from a staircase he had used in the dark for years. You signed something? Yes. Another silence. For the first time since Christmas, certainty left his voice. Robert did not argue with me again that morning. That frightened me less than his anger would have. For weeks, my father had treated the sale as a disagreement he could outlast. He had said nobody was going anywhere. He had objected to the notice, the sign, the showings, the very idea that a process could continue without his approval. The live contract changed something because it introduced people outside the family who had made decisions based on mine. There was a couple with financing. Earnest money, deadlines, and a plan. My father could disapprove of me. He could not order strangers in Cincinnati to stop relocating because he disliked how his daughter had handled Christmas. The first sign of that change came 2 days later. Dad sent me a link to a 3-bedroom rental less than 3 miles from the house. No greeting, no comment, just the link. I opened it between meetings at work. The house was smaller than the one my parents were leaving, but not by much. It had a garage, a fenced yard, 2 bathrooms, and a monthly rent of $2,400 before utilities. A second message appeared. Can you tell me if this is normal now? I stared at the question for a few seconds. It was the first question he had asked about moving that was not really a command wearing a question mark. I wrote back that, for a detached 3-bedroom in that part of the Columbus suburbs, yes, it was within the range I had been seeing. I reminded him that Denise's earlier market comparison had put similar rental value around $2,300 to $2,500. I did not add that he and Mom had been paying me about $1,050. The arithmetic did not need emotional emphasis. 5 minutes later, he sent another listing. $2,250, no garage, utilities separate. Then another. $2,600, nicer kitchen, farther from their doctors. By lunch, the pattern was clear. Dad was trying to reproduce the old house somewhere else, only now the market was putting a price beside every feature he had treated as normal. That evening, he called me. I'm not paying $2,500 to rent somebody else's house, he said. The old authority was still in his voice, but it had nowhere to land. I dried my hands on a dish towel and leaned against my kitchen counter. Then you probably shouldn't rent a comparable house. He was quiet. A month earlier, that sentence would have sounded disrespectful even to me. Now it was simply a budget fact. Dad told me he and Mom had gone through their retirement deposits, Social Security, insurance premiums, prescriptions, car expenses, and the costs they had never thought about because the house had absorbed them differently. He did not say he was grateful for the old arrangement. He did not need to. The numbers were saying what neither of us had ever put into a sentence. My parents had not been poor. They had also not been living at the price their lifestyle actually cost. Dad had assumed downsizing meant finding a slightly smaller version of what he already had. The market showed him something else. A detached house with a garage and enough room to host everyone would consume too much of their monthly income once utilities, maintenance expectations, and the rest of their retirement expenses were included. A comfortable 2-bedroom apartment in a senior-friendly complex was possible. Another private 3-bedroom house in the same area was not sensible. He hated that distinction. I could hear it in the way he described every apartment listing by what it lacked. No basement, no private yard. One had parking under a carport instead of a garage. Another had a dining area he called a breakfast corner, pretending to be a room. A third had enough space, but was on the opposite side of town from his preferred hardware store, which somehow made the entire complex suspect. I did not laugh at him. For 5 years, that house had not only been shelter, it had been part of how Dad understood himself. He had a garage, where he decided where every tool belonged. A dining room where he sat at the head of the table. A yard where he chose when the leaves were raked and which shrubs needed cutting back. Losing square footage was one thing. Losing the places where his authority had physical shape was another. But none of that changed the budget. I can send you the apartment list I offered before, I said. There are a few 2-bedrooms with elevators, parking, and enough room for a small table. I don't need a senior home. They're apartments, Dad. Some are age-restricted, some aren't. I'm 71, not 91. I know. That answer left him with nothing to fight. The next afternoon, he asked me to resend the list. That was the actual collapse of, nobody is going anywhere. Not a dramatic apology, not a defeated speech. A man who had insisted the decision did not exist, asking his daughter to resend housing options, because now he had to choose among them. I sent the list. I did not choose for him. That part mattered too. Dad had spent years deciding what was practical for everybody else. If I took over his apartment search, called leasing offices, ranked units, and managed his move simply because I was better at spreadsheets, I would rebuild the old arrangement from the opposite direction. I could help. I would not become responsible for making relocation painless enough that he never had to own the choice. He and Mom toured 2 places that week without me. Dad called one leasing office a second time to ask what the advertised rent did not include. By the time he finished, he had added a security deposit, application fees, electricity, internet, renter's insurance, and parking to the numbers he was comparing. He sent me his total, then corrected it himself 10 minutes later because he had missed one fee. I did not tell him which complex to choose. I only pointed out that a lower rent farther away could be erased by driving costs, and that an elevator might matter more over time than another wall around the dining area. For the first time, Dad was not arguing about whether he should have to move. He was comparing trade-offs inside a move he now accepted was happening. I learned that because Patricia called afterward, not to tell me how they liked them, but to say the first apartment was too small for a family Christmas, and the second had a kitchen with hardly any counter space. I said, "You're choosing a home for 2 people." She did not answer for a moment. Then she said, "That's a sad way to look at family." I let the sentence pass. The house contract had moved the argument out of language and into consequence. My parents could call a 2-bedroom sad. They still had to decide whether they could afford it. 3 days later, Amanda called me during my lunch hour. She sounded tired before she said hello. "Mom says you can still ask the buyers to wait." I closed the spreadsheet on my screen. Wait for what? For everything to settle down. I almost laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because settle down had become the family phrase for return to the old arrangement. Amanda clarified that she was not asking me to pretend the house belonged to Mom and Dad. She was not arguing about the deed anymore. She knew the contract was real. She knew I had the right to sell. What she wanted was time. Her townhouse lease was ending. The smaller rental near her office was still available, but she had not applied yet. Chloe's school schedule was difficult to coordinate with her work. Owen's after-school program had limited days. Deposits, movers, storage, and 2 children's routines all had to be rearranged because the plan she had relied on had disappeared. She asked whether I could delay closing, extend possession, or otherwise give her another month or 2 before the house completely left the family. It was a different argument from the first one we had after Christmas. That mattered enough that I listened all the way through. Amanda was no longer telling me our parents had some moral authority over my property. She was telling me that she had built a real plan around a promise, discovered the promise was invalid, and now wanted the person with the power to absorb some of the disruption. I understood why she asked. I also knew what saying yes would do. The buyers already agreed to the transition period Mom and Dad have, I said. I'm not asking them to restructure the contract around another household that was never supposed to move in. I'm not saying I should move in now. I know. Then what's the harm in asking them for more time? Because I signed an agreement, Amanda. She exhaled sharply. You keep saying that like contracts are weather. No, I'm saying I made a decision other people are now relying on. That stopped her for a second. It was the same problem underneath everything, and I think she heard it even though neither of us named it. My parents had promised my property because they assumed my consent would eventually appear. Amanda was now asking me to treat the buyer's consent as something I could casually renegotiate because the family wanted a different outcome. I would not do that. I told her I would help her compare the rentals she had found. I could send the moving company I had used 2 years earlier. If she needed a second set of eyes on a lease before she signed, I could look for practical issues, though I was not her lawyer. I could take Chloe and Owen for one Saturday while she packed if our schedules worked. What I would not do was break or manipulate the sale contract to restore the possibility of the house becoming the solution. Amanda was silent for several seconds. Then she said, "You always have a version of help that stops exactly where you want it to." The sentence hurt because the old me would have heard it as an accusation. This time I heard the definition inside it. "Yes," I said. She went quiet again. "I guess that's convenient. It's a boundary. I know what you call it." I did not defend the word. We moved on to the rentals. There were 3 serious options by then. One was cheapest, but would add almost 40 minutes to Amanda's commute and take the children farther from school. One was near Mom and Dad's current neighborhood, but smaller than Amanda wanted and expensive enough that she would have almost no cushion after utilities. The third was about 25 minutes from my parents, close to Amanda's school office job, and still within a manageable drive for Chloe and Owen. It was a modest 2-bedroom with a small den, no garage, and a shared green space behind the building. The rent was not easy on one income, but it was possible. Amanda disliked all 3, because none of them were the arrangement she had been promised. That did not make them bad options. "I hate that I have to do this fast," she said. "I know. I hate that the kids already pictured the other house. I know, and I still think you could have waited." "I know that too." She sounded almost annoyed that I would not argue with her. Then she said, "I'm going to tour the 3rd one tomorrow." That was a new sentence. Not Mom says. Not Dad promised. Not if Claire changes her mind. "I'm going to tour it." "Good," I said. "Don't sound pleased." "I'm not pleased you're in this situation. I'm glad you're making a plan that belongs to you." She did not answer. The next day, Dad sent me a photograph from the lobby of one of the apartment complexes on the list I had resent. In the picture, there was a fireplace, 2 upholstered chairs, and a fake ficus tree beside a brochure rack. "Your mother says this looks like a hotel." I wrote back, "Is that good or bad?" He replied, "Apparently bad." It was the closest either of us had come to humor since Christmas. I did not overvalue it. Dad still had not apologized to Lucy. He had not told me I had been right. He had not transformed into a different man because market rent annoyed him. But he was looking. He had moved from refusing the future to measuring it. A few hours later, he called and asked whether I knew how much electricity usually ran in a 2-bedroom apartment. I gave him a range and suggested he ask the leasing office for average utility information. He wrote it down. No command, no argument. Numbers had done what I could not have done by shouting. They had made his authority irrelevant to the outcome. Amanda toured the 3rd rental that afternoon. She called me from her car afterward. Chloe liked the small den because she thought it could fit a desk and a beanbag chair. Owen had already decided the shared green space was good enough for a soccer ball. The kitchen was narrow. The 2nd bedroom meant the children would need a carefully planned setup, and the complex had no dramatic charm at all. Amanda sounded relieved despite herself. The office said if I apply today, they can hold it while they run everything. Does the budget work? Barely. Barely as in you can do it, or barely as in you need me to tell you it's fine? That was rude. It was a question. She was quiet, then gave a short laugh I had not heard from her in weeks. I can do it, she said. I just won't be ordering takeout much. Then that's information. She told me the deposit amount and the proposed move-in date. We went through the practical pieces for 10 minutes. I did not offer money. She did not ask for it. When she mentioned the application fee, I waited long enough to notice the old reflex in myself, the urge to solve the number because I could. I let the urge pass. Amanda said, I think I'm going to apply. Okay. You're not going to tell me what to do? It's your lease. Another pause. Then she said, Right. By evening, she had submitted the application. That did not make her my ally. She still thought I had forced the timing. She still believed I had chosen a hard boundary at the moment the family was least equipped to absorb it. But one form of dependence was gone. Amanda was no longer waiting for access to my property before she could decide where her children would sleep. Patricia noticed immediately. I did not hear their conversation. I only knew about it because Amanda called me the following night. Her first words were, Mom is furious about the apartment. I was folding laundry on my bed. Did your application get approved? Not yet. They said tomorrow, probably. That's not the point. I put down one of Lucy's sweatshirts. Amanda told me she had called Mom to explain the rental. She had expected Patricia to complain about the price, or the smaller space. Instead, Mom's first concern was the location. Too far away. Amanda had reminded her that it was close to work and reasonable for the children's school. Patricia said that was not what she meant. The whole point of the original plan, she said, was that the family would finally be close enough that nobody had to manage everything alone. At first, Amanda thought she was talking about childcare. Then Patricia said the new complex would make things difficult when we need each other. Amanda paused while telling me this. I felt the same pause on my end. The phrase was ordinary enough to mean almost anything. A flat tire, a sick child, picking up groceries in bad weather. Family did need each other sometimes. I refused to build a new accusation out of one sentence. What did you say? I asked. I told her 25 minutes isn't another state. And? She said I was missing the point. That sounded like Mom, Amanda continued. Patricia had started comparing distances. From the old house to the medical center. From Amanda's possible rental to Mom and Dad's likely apartment options. From Amanda's work to their neighborhood. She talked about everyone being scattered, about how much harder life became when family members lived in different directions, about the benefit of having somebody nearby who knew what was happening. Amanda said, Claire, she sounded more upset about where I might live than about whether I actually had somewhere to live. I sat down on the edge of my bed. That was new too. Not because Patricia had suddenly changed, because Amanda had noticed the mismatch herself. What does she want you to do? I asked. She wants me to wait before signing anything. She says there are closer places. Are they better for you? No, the one near them costs more and puts me farther from work. Then what reason did she give? Amanda was silent. Finally, she said, "She just keeps saying we were supposed to be close." I thought about all the ways my mother had used that word over the last month. Lucy was close by. I was close by. Amanda and the kids would be close. Things would be easier for everybody. I had always heard closeness as geography wrapped in sentiment. Maybe that was all it was. I did not know yet. Amanda said, "I told her the farther rental might actually be better for the kids." What did she say? Her voice changed when she repeated it, less angry, more unsettled. She said, "That doesn't work for us." I stopped folding the shirt in my hands. Amanda let the silence sit this time, instead of filling it. Then she said, "So I asked her, why does where I live have to work for you?" Neither of us had an answer yet. The answer arrived the next morning, though not from my mother. Amanda texted me just after 9 to say the apartment application had been approved. The message was short enough to fit on one line. Approved. Lease is in my inbox. Need to decide by tomorrow. I read it twice before answering. Congratulations felt wrong. So did I told you so. I wrote, "That gives you a real option." She replied with a thumbs up and nothing else. For most of the day, the house sale moved quietly in the background while I worked. My parents were looking at apartments. Amanda had a lease offer in front of her, and Lucy had started speaking to me normally again, though Grandma was still a careful subject. By late afternoon, I almost believed everyone had begun planning around reality. Then Amanda called. "I need you on another call." I leaned back in my office chair. "With who?" "You know who." I looked at the time. "What happened?" Amanda said Mom had called twice during her lunch break, and once after school let out. Patricia had found 2 other apartment listings she thought were better. Neither was better for Amanda. One cost more and added distance to her job. The other was closer to our parents' likely apartment area, but would make the children's school mornings harder. Amanda had told her she was probably going to take the approved rental anyway. Mom had not taken that as a housing decision. She had taken it as disobedience. "She says we need to talk about the family plan," Amanda said. The phrase landed differently now. A month earlier, family plan would have sounded warm to me. It would have meant dinner schedules, holidays, who picked up which child, maybe where we celebrated birthdays. Now I had seen what happened when a plan was called family before the people supplying the resources had agreed to it. "I don't think there is a family plan anymore," I said. "I know. That's why I want you on the call." I did not hear alliance in her voice. Not yet. Amanda still believed I had forced the timing. She still thought I could have handled Christmas without selling the house. But she no longer wanted to be alone in a conversation where Mom kept talking as if Amanda's address had to satisfy requirements. Amanda did not understand. That was enough reason for me to join. We agreed to call Patricia after dinner, once Chloe and Owen were occupied, and Lucy was upstairs working on a science project. I told Lucy I had to talk with Grandma and Aunt Amanda about housing. I did not give her details. She only asked whether the call was about her. "No," I said. That was true, and I was glad it was true. At 7:30, Amanda started the group call. My mother answered on the second ring. Dad was somewhere nearby. I could hear a television and the scrape of a chair, but he did not join immediately. Patricia began by saying she was relieved. We were finally willing to discuss the situation sensibly. I almost stopped her there. Instead, I let Amanda go first. My sister said the rental application had been approved. She said the place worked for her budget, was close to her job, kept the children within a manageable school routine, and could be ready before her townhouse lease ended. She intended to sign. My mother did not congratulate her or ask whether the place worked for the children. She said, 25 minutes is too far. Amanda went quiet. In the pause, I heard her deciding whether the next sentence needed to become a fight. "It's 25 minutes from you now," Amanda said. "You don't even know exactly where you're moving yet." "We know the general area. That's not the same thing." Patricia said the places she and Dad were considering were all on one side of Columbus, while Amanda's rental was in the other direction. Amanda reminded her that it was near the children's school and her job. My mother said that was only part of the equation. There was that word again, equation. She did not say it coldly. That would have been easier to recognize. She sounded practical, reasonable, like someone reviewing a plan everyone else had somehow forgotten to finish. I stayed quiet. Amanda asked, "What other part?" Patricia started with Dad. Robert had 2 regular medical appointments that sometimes conflicted with times. Patricia had other things scheduled. He did not like driving downtown in bad weather. There were days when one of them needed to pick up a prescription or get to a follow-up visit, and it would be easier if family were nearby. Amanda said, "You both drive. For now." The words were soft. I looked at the phone in my hand. That was the first moment the conversation changed shape. Patricia went on before either of us could respond. Dad's knees were not what they used to be. Winter driving was getting more stressful. There were groceries, appointments, small repairs, technology problems, paperwork. She said none of those things were emergencies. But families did better when someone could stop by without making it an expedition. My mother was not describing a crisis. She was describing infrastructure. Amanda said, "Claire lives closer than I would." I did not appreciate being volunteered into the sentence, but I let it stand. Patricia answered, "Claire has her own responsibilities." The irony was so sharp I nearly laughed. Amanda heard it too. "So do I." "Of course you do. But mine are somehow supposed to fit around yours?" "That is not what I said. It's what you keep describing." My mother's patience thinned. She said Amanda was making a normal family expectation sound like a contract. Parents helped children when the children needed it. Later, adult children helped parents when needs changed. That was not manipulation. That was life. I listened closely because, unlike the Christmas argument, this was not about one child carrying plates. Patricia was widening the principle. Amanda asked when exactly they had discussed her being the person responsible for those future needs. Mom said nobody was assigning responsibility. She was talking about being available. Amanda laughed once, without humor. Available for what? The list came more clearly after that. Driving Dad to appointments, checking on them if one was sick, picking up groceries, helping in the apartment, being nearby if there was a fall or medication problem, and eventually making sure they did not have to depend on strangers for every little thing. None of those tasks was unreasonable by itself. The problem was that my mother was talking about Amanda's proximity as though the tasks already belonged to her. Amanda was quiet long enough that Patricia mistook silence for agreement. "That's why the house made sense," Mom said. "You would have had help with the children, and we would all be together. Nobody would have been doing everything alone." Something in me went cold. Not because it was evil, because it was balanced in my mother's mind. Amanda received housing. Therefore, Amanda supplied future availability. Lucy received praise and belonging. Therefore, Lucy supplied labor. I had financial stability and property. Therefore, the property became available. No one had negotiated any of it. Patricia would have been offended by the suggestion that she had calculated an exchange, but the exchange was there. Amanda heard only part of it at first. So the house wasn't just supposed to help me. My mother sounded surprised by the question. "Of course it was supposed to help you. That's not what I asked." Patricia sighed. "Amanda, everything cannot be reduced to who gets what." I almost said something. I stopped myself. Amanda needed to hear the answer without me interpreting it for her. She asked again, "If I take the apartment that works for me and the kids, What exactly is the problem? My mother gave 3 practical answers: distance, time, coordination. Amanda rejected all 3. 25 minutes was manageable. She worked near the rental. The children's school was nearby. She could still visit. She was not moving to another state. If Mom and Dad needed help sometimes, they could ask. That word ask changed the air. Patricia did not like it. I could hear it in the slight pause before she answered. She said families should not have to make formal requests for every ordinary act of care. Amanda said, "Why not?" Mom sounded genuinely baffled. "Because that's not how family works," Amanda asked. "Then how does it work?" Dad's voice appeared faintly in the background, telling Patricia not to get upset. She ignored him. She said people who loved one another noticed what needed to be done. They did not wait to be asked. They showed up. They stayed close. They made life easier for each other. I had heard versions of those words my whole life. For years, I had thought they described generosity. Now I noticed the missing piece. Who got to decide what needed to be done? Amanda's voice was quieter when she spoke again. "Mom, I'm taking the apartment," Patricia answered immediately. "Don't sign anything tonight. I already have the lease." "Then wait." "Why?" "Because we need to think through what this does to everyone." Amanda's frustration finally broke through. "It gives my kids a place to live. You already had a place to live with us until Claire decided to sell." There it was again, the old plan treated as if my consent had been a technical detail. Amanda did not chase it. She said, "That plan is gone. I'm solving the problem." "You're solving your problem." The words were out before Patricia seemed to hear them herself. Amanda went silent. "So did I." My mother tried to soften the sentence. She said that was not what she meant. Of course Amanda had to think about her children. Of course school and work mattered. But family decisions had consequences beyond one household. Amanda asked, "What consequence does my apartment create for you?" Patricia hesitated. Then the truth came out in the least dramatic way possible. "If you move somewhere else, who's supposed to be here when we need help?" No one spoke. I heard the television in my parents' background. I heard a truck pass outside my own house. From upstairs came the faint sound of Lucy's desk chair rolling across the floor. Amanda finally said, "What?" My mother said she and Dad were getting older and had always assumed their daughters would be around. My job was demanding. Amanda's schedule was more predictable. The old house had made all of that feel natural because everyone would have been close. Natural. That was the word that exposed everything. The future had been assigned before anybody reached it. Amanda's free housing was not a trick. My parents had absolutely intended to help her. Patricia had not secretly planned to charge her money or steal her income. The price was more complicated. Gratitude, proximity, availability. A future yes, that had never been requested because Mom believed helping Amanda now made the later yes part of the same family current. Amanda said, very slowly, "You wanted me there so I could take care of you." Patricia objected to the wording. She said take care of sounded like nursing care, and that was not what she meant. She and Dad were perfectly independent. She was talking about family support over time. "That's still care," Amanda said. "That's still family." The conversation could have turned into another argument about definitions. Amanda did not let it. She asked one concrete question. "Did you tell me any of this when you offered me the house?" Patricia said she had not thought she needed to. That answer did more than any accusation could have done. Amanda said she had to go. Mom started to object, but Amanda ended the call. The line went dead, leaving only my connection open for half a second before the app returned me to my home screen. I sat at the kitchen table without moving. A minute later, Amanda called me back privately. Her first words were, "Did you know?" "No." "About the appointments, the groceries, all of that." "No." I heard her breathing. "I knew they expected help," I said. I didn't know they had built your housing around keeping you available. Amanda was quiet. I did not fill the silence by telling her I had been right. I had spent too many years learning how damaging it was when somebody used another person's shock as an opening to recruit them. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed. Not softer toward me, clearer toward herself. Amanda did not suddenly agree with me about the sale. She still thought I had moved too fast, and she still believed our parents had meant to help. What changed was her understanding of the price attached to that help. The house would have saved her money and simplified the children's schedule, but Mom had just admitted that proximity was part of the bargain. Amanda asked whether I thought our parents had done the same thing to me. I told her my version was different. I had not received housing from them. I had received the identity of being the daughter they could always count on. She was quiet, then said, "Lucy got to be the right hand." Yes, that was enough. My property, Lucy's labor, Amanda's future availability. Different resources, same assumption. None of us needed another speech about it. Amanda did not rewrite her whole childhood in 10 minutes. She only said, "I don't want the apartment decision to belong to them." That makes sense, and I don't want it to belong to you either. Good, she laughed once. You really like that answer now. I'm learning. The lease was still open on her laptop. I heard keys tap while she reread the move-in section. The deposit was due within 24 hours. She had the money, the move-in date worked, and the children could keep their school routine. She said it all as if proving the decision to herself. I did not approve it for her. Finally, she said, "I'm signing it." "Okay." More tapping. Then a pause. "It's done." The sentence was almost identical to mine after I accepted the house offer, and the difference between us struck me. I had signed something to end an arrangement. Amanda had signed something to build one that no one else had designed for her. She exhaled. "I need to tell Mom." "You don't have to do it tonight." "Yes, I do." Her voice was steady now. Then she surprised me. "Stay on the call." I asked if she was sure. "Yes, not to fight. I just don't want her to tell you later that I said something I didn't say." It was not strategy. It was two sisters who had learned how easily family conversations change shape depending on who retold them. Amanda called Patricia and merged me in. Mom answered cautiously. Amanda did not build toward it. I signed my own lease. There was a silence. Then my mother said, "After everything we were going to give you?" Amanda took a slow breath before answering. "That's the problem. You never told me what you expected to take back." Patricia started to say that was unfair. Amanda kept going, but she did not make a speech. She said she would not move into the old house even if the buyers disappeared, and Claire decided not to sell. She would not trade housing for an unspoken promise to organize her life around Mom and Dad's future needs. She would visit. She would help sometimes. She would answer the phone. She loved them. None of that meant she was agreeing now to become the default person who drove, shopped, checked in, solved emergencies, or eventually lived close enough to function as unpaid on-call care. Patricia said no one had asked for that. Amanda answered, "You just did." Dad spoke from the background, saying this was getting blown out of proportion. Amanda did not argue. "I'm not asking you to agree. I'm telling you where I'm living." It was Dad's old kind of sentence without Dad's old kind of authority. Amanda was only claiming her own choice. Patricia asked whether Claire had talked her into this. Amanda's answer came immediately. No, my mother did not believe her. I could hear it in the silence. Amanda said, "Claire and I still disagree about the sale." That mattered. She was not joining my side. She was leaving Patricia's plan. "I'm not doing this for Claire," she continued. "I'm doing it because I want one decision in my life right now that doesn't come with somebody else's future written into it." Patricia's voice went thin. "So we're strangers now. We have to schedule every favor and negotiate every little thing? Amanda said no. They were family. That was exactly why she wanted help to remain help instead of debt. No one named until repayment was due. My mother did not accept that framing. She did not apologize. She said she and Dad had spent years helping both of us, and never kept a ledger. Amanda answered quietly. Then don't start one in my future. Another silence. Dad did not step in this time. Maybe because he had his own apartment brochures on the table. Maybe because market rent had already taught him that declaring a thing unfair did not make the thing disappear. I could not know. What I did know was that Patricia had lost another certainty. First the house, then Lucy's automatic availability, now Amanda's proximity. The family system had been held together by assumptions nobody challenged, while the benefits still seemed easier than the cost. Amanda had challenged one. Patricia finally said she was tired and ended the call. For several seconds, Amanda and I stayed connected without speaking. Then she said, I have to tell the kids tomorrow. About the apartment? Yeah. How do you feel? She thought for a moment. Terrified. I smiled despite myself. That sounds believable. And relieved. That too. She laughed softly. Before we hung up, she said, I still think you're stubborn. I know. And you're not getting an apology for Christmas from me tonight. I didn't ask for one. I know. There was something almost peaceful in that. Not forgiveness, not repair, just two adults standing in different places without Patricia arranging the distance between us. After the call, I walked upstairs. Lucy's bedroom door was open. She was cutting construction paper for her science project, scraps scattered around her desk. She looked up. Everything okay? I thought about what Amanda had just done, about the apartment, about the call, about the way one family promise had turned out to contain years of imagined obligation. No one had spoken aloud. I did not tell Lucy any of that. It was not her burden. Aunt Amanda found a place, I said. Lucy's face brightened. For her and Chloe and Owen? Yes. So they're okay? They have a plan. She nodded, and some small tension left her shoulders. That was all she needed to know. I went back downstairs and put my phone on the charger. For the first time since Christmas, the question was no longer whether Patricia could keep the house, or whether she could still make Amanda's move happen, or whether Lucy would remain her right hand. Those answers were becoming fixed. The new question was what my mother believed family was supposed to be once nobody else's property, labor, or future could be assigned without permission. The answer to that question did not arrive in another argument. It arrived as cardboard boxes. 3 evenings after Amanda signed her lease, she called me and asked if I could come over Saturday morning for 2 hours. Not all day. Not until everything was finished. 2 hours to help her sort the kitchen and decide what should go directly to the new apartment and what could stay packed until after the move. The precision of the request caught my attention because it was unlike the way our family usually asked for help. We tended to say things like, whenever you can, or I hate to bother you, or could you maybe swing by? And then the actual obligation expanded in the space left by the vagueness. Amanda gave me a time, a task, and an ending. I said yes. Saturday morning, I found her townhouse half dismantled. Flattened boxes leaned against the dining room wall. 2 kitchen drawers were open at once. Chloe had written "new place" on several cartons in purple marker, and Owen had apparently decided every box needed at least 1 soccer ball doodle. Amanda was standing in the middle of the kitchen, holding 3 mismatched travel mugs and looking as though they had personally betrayed her. Keep, donate, or admit I've been moving these for 12 years for no reason? She asked. Third option. She dropped 2 into a donation box. That was about as warm as we were for the first 20 minutes. We worked instead of talking. I wrapped glasses while Amanda emptied the pantry. We threw out spices old enough to have moved with her twice. Chloe came through once to ask whether the small den could really be hers for homework if Owen promised not to bother her. Amanda told her it would be shared space, and that promises from 8-year-old brothers were not a legally recognized form of zoning. Chloe rolled her eyes and disappeared again. The apartment was real enough now that the children had started arguing about it. That was healthier than drawing imaginary desks in rooms my parents had no right to promise them. Amanda had also solved more of the practical pieces than I knew. She had talked with the school's aftercare program about adding another afternoon for Owen. She had shifted one of her work obligations so she could leave earlier on a different day. Chloe was old enough to handle a short period at home after school on some afternoons, but Amanda was not building the whole plan around that either. None of it was elegant. The schedule had gaps, backup choices, and a little more cost than she wanted. It belonged to her. Around 10:30, while I was taping the bottom of a box, Amanda said, "I liked being the one Mom rescued." The sentence was so abrupt that I looked up. She was wiping a cabinet shelf with a damp cloth. She did not look at me. "I'm not saying I spent my childhood planning to take advantage of you," she continued. "I didn't. And I'm not sorry I needed help after my marriage fell apart. I did need help. I know. But I liked that Mom always had an answer for me." She wrung out the cloth over the sink. If something went wrong, she knew who could fix it. Sometimes that person was Dad. A lot of the time it was you. I put the tape gun down. Amanda finally looked at me. "I never really asked what that cost you." There were several answers available. Money, time, weekends. The invisible tax of being the person whose calendar was assumed to have more room because her crisis was not currently the biggest one in the family. I did not list them. "You didn't invent the system," I said. "No." She shook her head. "But I benefited from it." That was different from an apology, and I was glad. A grand confession would have made the conversation too easy. Amanda and I still disagreed about the sale. She still thought I had acted too fast after Christmas. I still thought she had accepted an enormous promise about my property, with far too little curiosity about whether I had agreed. Neither of those facts disappeared, because our mother had finally revealed a hidden expectation that frightened both of us. Amanda leaned back against the counter. "When Mom said I could move in, I heard free rent for a while. I heard help with the kids. I heard breathing room. That makes sense. I didn't hear appointments when Dad gets older. Grocery runs. Being the one who lives closest because somebody decided my work schedule was easier." I waited. She looked toward the living room where Owen was asking Chloe whether a lamp would fit in the den. "I'm figuring out childcare myself. I'm figuring out the apartment myself. Not because I never want anyone's help again. I just don't want help to turn into a bill that arrives 5 years later." That was the first time since Christmas I felt something between us change, without either of us needing the other to surrender. Not closeness. We had too much history for instant closeness. Cooperation. Two adult women who could disagree about what had happened, and still refuse to let Patricia make either one responsible for settling the disagreement. At 11:45, I sealed the last box I had promised to help with and stood up. Amanda looked at the clock, then at the remaining kitchen. "You're really leaving at noon?" "Yes." She stared at me for half a second, then smiled in spite of herself. "I walked into that." "You did. I can finish." "I know." On the drive home, I realized that 2 hours of helping Amanda had not made me feel used. I was tired. My back hurt a little from bending over boxes, and I had given up a Saturday morning. But the request had been hers, the answer had been mine, and the end had remained where we put it. Nothing about that felt cold. 3 days later, Dad called with news about the apartment. He and Mom had chosen one of the complexes we had discussed earlier. The same place with the lobby Patricia had said looked like a hotel. The unit they could comfortably afford was a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor, with an elevator nearby, one covered parking space, a small balcony, and enough room for a dining table if they chose a smaller one than the 8-seat table in the old house. The rent was a little under $1,800 a month. Electricity, internet, and a few other utilities would be theirs separately. It was substantially more than the $1,050 they had been paying me, but it fit their combined retirement income without forcing them to choose between housing and ordinary expenses. Dad described the numbers plainly now. That alone showed me how far he had moved from, "Nobody is going anywhere." Then he said there was another unit available. Same building, 2 bedrooms plus a den, larger dining area, more storage, an extra $400 a month. I knew what was coming before he said Mom wanted it. "She thinks the den would make a better guest room," Dad said. "And there'd be room for the table." "The big table?" "She hates the idea of getting rid of it." I pictured the table immediately. Dark wood, heavy legs, the chair at the head where Dad had sat every holiday, the empty place Lucy had tried to take. I did not let the image make the decision for me. "Can you afford the larger unit?" I asked. Dad hesitated. "We can pay it." "That's not what I asked." Another pause. "No," he said finally. "Not comfortably." I appreciated the answer. That evening, Patricia called me herself. She did not spend long pretending the question was about apartment layouts. She said the larger unit would let them keep more furniture, host birthdays and holidays, and have space if one of the grandchildren needed to stay over. Then she pointed out that I was about to receive proceeds from selling the house. I said nothing at first. My mother continued carefully. She was not asking me to buy them anything. She was not asking for thousands all at once. If I contributed the difference each month, they could take the larger apartment and preserve more of the life they already had. "You mean about $400 every month?" I said. "For now." The phrase almost made me smile. "For how long is for now? We don't have to decide everything tonight." That was exactly why I had to decide my part tonight. "No," I said. "I'm not taking on part of your rent." Her breath sharpened. "You've been helping with housing for 5 years. "Yes. And now, when we actually have to move because of a decision you made, you're stopping?" "Yes." The second answer was harder, but it was still true. Patricia said I was treating a long family arrangement as though I could shut off one line item and call that morality. She reminded me that the larger apartment was still smaller than the house. She said they were not asking for luxury. She said the sale would leave me in a stronger financial position while they were being forced to spend more every month. I did not argue about what counted as luxury. I did not calculate the years of below-market rent out loud. I did not tell her how much income I had given up by keeping the old arrangement in place. All of those facts existed, but none of them answered the only question that mattered now. Was I willing to become responsible for part of my parents' monthly housing again? I was not. "I'll help with the move," I said. "I can cover the moving truck one time. I already have boxes you can use. I can sit down with Dad and compare the utility plans if you want another set of eyes, but I am not paying part of your rent every month. You keep finding ways to help that cost you the least." That sentence might have flattened me 6 weeks earlier. Now I heard what it was asking me to prove. That help was only sincere if the limit hurt enough. "I'm offering what I'm willing to offer," I said. Patricia was quiet. Then Dad spoke from somewhere near her. "We'll take the smaller one." My mother said his name sharply. He did not raise his voice. "We can afford it." There was no apology in that sentence. No admission that I had been right. Dad was still unhappy. I could hear it. But he was choosing from the options that actually belonged to him. That mattered more than a dramatic surrender would have. They put down the deposit on the smaller apartment the next morning. I paid for the moving truck as promised. I did not pay the rent difference. The following Saturday, Lucy came with me to take boxes to the old house. I had asked whether she wanted to come. She said yes. I told her she did not have to help pack. She said she wanted to tape boxes because Grandpa always used too much tape and made them impossible to reopen. That criticism was accurate enough that even Dad laughed when she said it. The house looked different with half the decorations gone and cardboard stacked against the walls. The ceramic Christmas village had been wrapped and boxed. Several framed photographs were already off the walls, leaving pale rectangles in the paint. Dad had marked keep, donate, and apartment on boxes in thick black letters. Patricia was working through the linen closet with an expression that suggested every extra towel was a personal insult from square footage. No one mentioned Christmas dinner. That did not make the afternoon comfortable, but it made the work possible. Lucy taped 3 boxes of books. She carried a bag of throw pillows to the donation pile. When Patricia asked whether she could help wrap the glass serving bowl from the dining room, Lucy glanced at me automatically. Before I could say anything, my mother corrected herself. "Only if you want to." Lucy looked at the bowl, then at the stack she had already finished. "Maybe later," she said. Patricia's mouth tightened for the briefest moment. Then she said, "All right." Lucy went to the living room and sat on the floor with a paperback while the rest of us kept packing. No one died. No box collapsed because a 12-year-old stopped working. The move did not become impossible. That evening, on the drive home, Lucy stared out the passenger window for several miles before speaking. "You helped Grandma today." "I did." "And you're paying for the truck." "Yes." She turned toward me. "Then why was helping her at Christmas bad?" The question was not hostile. That was new. I thought about giving her the clean adult answer: consent, obligation, boundaries. The words were accurate, but they were too polished for what she was asking. So I used the day we had just lived. "You taped 3 boxes because you wanted to," I said. "Then you stopped." "I got bored. I noticed." She almost smiled. "And when you stopped, nobody told you the move was your responsibility. Nobody said Grandma and Grandpa would lose their apartment if you didn't finish. Nobody told you that you could sit down after everyone else's work was done." Lucy watched the road again. "I still helped." "Yes." "That's different?" "To me, yes." She thought for a while. Then she said, "You could have paid for the bigger apartment." I glanced at her. "I could have. Grandma told me the bigger one had a den." "She told me too." "Why didn't you?" "Because paying part of their rent every month would make their housing partly my responsibility again. Paying for one truck is one thing I chose to do. It ends when the truck is paid for." Lucy frowned as she worked through it. "So helping has to have an ending?" "Not always. But if it doesn't have an ending, you should know you agreed to that." She was quiet again. Streetlights moved across her face as we passed them. Finally, she said, "I don't think I want to be Grandma's right hand anymore." I kept both hands on the steering wheel. There were moments when I had learned not to rush toward the sentence I wanted most. "What changed?" I asked. Lucy pulled one sleeve over her fingers. "I still want to bake with her and help sometimes. She searched for the words. "If I'm her right hand, it feels like I'm supposed to be ready all the time." I let her finish. "I don't want her to stop liking me," she said. "I just want to be her granddaughter." My throat tightened. "That sounds reasonable." She looked at me, almost suspiciously. "That's it? What else do you want me to say?" "I don't know. You usually make things into a lesson now." I laughed before I could stop myself. "Fair." She smiled too, small but real. Then she leaned her head against the window and asked what we were having for dinner. I answered her. I did not turn the moment into a speech about breaking generational cycles. She had already changed the state of the story herself. For the first time, Lucy had separated the relationship she wanted from the role she no longer wanted to perform. She still loved Patricia. She simply no longer wanted love to come with a job title. By the last week of my parents' notice period, most of the practical future was settled. Amanda had a move-in date for her apartment. My parents had their keys to the two-bedroom unit and had begun taking over smaller loads before the truck came. Denise told me in one short call that the major buyer contingencies had cleared, and the closing date was scheduled after my parents' move-out. There was nothing left in the transaction that required family drama to keep it interesting. The old house was leaving us whether Patricia approved of the meeting or not. That was when she asked for one final meeting. Her message came on a Wednesday evening. "Before we leave, I want all of us to sit down together, not to fight. I want everyone to remember what family is supposed to mean." I read it at the kitchen counter while Lucy ate an apple beside me. She noticed my expression. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Is she mad?" "Probably." Lucy took another bite. "About the apartment?" "About more than the apartment." I did not show her the message yet. I called Patricia first. She answered quickly, as if she had been waiting with the phone in her hand. I told her I was willing to have one conversation before the move, but I set the conditions before she could explain what she wanted from it. The sale was not being reopened. Amanda's lease was not being debated. Lucy would not be asked to solve anyone's housing, care, moving, or emotional problems. If Lucy attended, she could leave the room whenever she wanted, and no adult would turn her into the subject of an argument. Patricia listened in silence. When I finished, she said, "You really think everything has to come with rules now?" "No, I think this conversation does." She exhaled slowly. Then she agreed. I asked what she believed still needed to be said if the house, the apartment, and Amanda's lease were no longer negotiable. For once, my mother did not mention the deed. She did not mention the buyers. She did not ask me to stop the closing. Her voice was tired when she answered, but there was something firm underneath it. "This isn't about the deed anymore," she said. "It's about whether this family still knows how to sacrifice for each other." I stood very still beside my kitchen counter. Sacrifice. For 6 weeks we had argued about a chair, a house, a lease, childcare, rent, distance, and future care. Every practical question had finally found an answer that no longer depended on Patricia assigning someone else's resources. Now she had named the belief underneath all of them. At last we had reached the real argument. The meeting was set for Sunday afternoon, 4 days before my parents' moving truck was due. By then the old house no longer looked like the center of a family. Framed photographs were down. Bookshelves were half empty. Pale rectangles marked the walls where pictures and my mother's large clock had hung for years. Boxes crowded the hallway, and the dining room table had been cleared, except for packing tape and folded newspaper. That table was where Patricia wanted us to sit. Amanda arrived a few minutes after Lucy and me. She had already moved several carloads to her apartment and looked tired in the practical way people look when their lives are divided between 2 addresses. None of us brought folders or lists. There was nothing left to prove about ownership or contracts. The buyers had cleared the major contingencies. Denise had confirmed the closing date. My parents had their apartment. Amanda had hers. Before we sat down, I took Lucy aside. "You do not have to stay," I told her. "You can leave the room or ask me to take you home. Nobody gets to question you about Christmas or ask you to decide anything. Grandma knows that?" "Yes." "And Grandpa?" "Yes." Lucy glanced toward the dining room. "I want to stay." I said okay. I did not praise her for being brave or tell her the conversation was important. She was not there to perform courage for adults. Robert was already seated, but not at the head. Some chairs had been marked for the move, and he sat along one side with coffee in front of him. Patricia took the chair across from him. Amanda sat near the end. Lucy chose the chair beside me. No one told her where to sit. My mother had asked for the meeting, but she seemed to struggle for a beginning that did not sound like another attempt to stop the sale. Finally, she said she understood the house was going. Amanda had signed a lease, and I was not going to pay the difference for the larger apartment. It was the first time she had stated all 3 facts, without arguing each one. Then she said none of those decisions answered what frightened her. Patricia said families changed over time. When children were young, parents did more because children could not. Parents paid for food, school clothes, doctors, rides, broken eyeglasses, birthday cakes, and hundreds of ordinary things nobody entered into a ledger. They got up at night when children were sick. They changed schedules. They gave what they had because that was what parents did. None of that was false. As children became adults, she said, the shape of need changed. One daughter might have more money. Another might have more flexible time. A grandchild might be old enough to help younger children. Parents aged. Marriages broke apart. Somebody needed a ride or a place to land. In her view, families survived by moving help toward the largest need. She did not say it angrily. That mattered. She was giving us the strongest version of the belief that had organized our family for years. The house, in her mind, had been an available resource in a family, with several needs, and refusing to use an available resource simply because one person legally owned it felt selfish to her. You were stable, she told me. You had your own home. You had this property. Your father and I needed somewhere smaller. Letting us live here made sense. It did, I said, when I agreed to it. She heard the qualification but continued. Amanda later needed somewhere to land after her separation. The house had room. Mom and Dad were already there. Why should family pay market rent somewhere else while family space existed? Then Patricia glanced at Lucy. Lucy was older than Chloe and Owen, capable, and liked helping. Asking an older child to contribute, Mom said, was not turning her into a servant. It taught her to notice other people. Lucy shifted beside me, but Patricia respected the rule and did not ask her to answer. Robert joined in. His argument was less emotional. Families were not workplaces, he said. They did not run on exact exchanges. Sometimes one person carried more because that person could. Another person might carry more later. If every favor required an equal return, no family would survive a crisis. I never said every favor has to be equal, I said. It sounds like you are. No, I'm saying the person giving the favor still gets to know they're giving it. He frowned, but did not command me to stop. 6 weeks earlier, that would have been his instinct. Now his apartment lease was signed, and the moving schedule was taped to the refrigerator. Dad reminded me that when Amanda and I were children, they had never calculated which daughter cost more. If Amanda needed braces, they paid for braces. If I had a school trip later, they paid for that. Fairness did not mean identical treatment. The family absorbed unequal needs. That's true, I said. Both my parents looked surprised. I don't think helping someone who needs more is wrong. I don't think Lucy setting a table is wrong. I don't think Amanda getting more help during a separation is wrong. I don't think helping you move because you're older is wrong. My mother leaned back slightly. Then what are we doing here? We're here because you kept deciding who would give the help. She went still. I did not count dollars or chores. The direction mattered more than the amount. When I had property, you started treating the property as available beyond what I agreed to. When Amanda needed housing, you promised her my house instead of asking me. When Lucy became capable, you treated her time like something the household could plan around. When Amanda accepted the housing you offered, you quietly treated her future proximity and help as part of the plan. Dad's face tightened. Amanda looked down. The problem isn't that anybody ever helps more, I said. The problem is that you assign the person who is supposed to help, and then you call refusal a failure of family. Mom said that was unfair. She reminded me that I had offered the house to them originally. That's true. Lucy had liked helping. Yes. Amanda had wanted the house. Yes. My agreement only frustrated her more. Then you keep rewriting normal choices after the fact. No. I'm separating the choices people made from the choices you added later. Amanda spoke for the first time. She said she had wanted the house. She had wanted cheaper housing and help with the children. She still wished some version of that option had existed. But she had never agreed that accepting it meant arranging her future around our parents' appointments, groceries, and eventual care. Patricia said nobody had asked Amanda to sign a caregiving contract. That's the point, Amanda said. Nobody asked at all. Dad rubbed his jaw. He said people could not know what they would need 10 years in advance. If you need me 10 years from now, ask me 10 years from now, Amanda said. And if the answer is no? Mom asked. Amanda took a breath. Then you'll have to make another plan. Patricia looked genuinely wounded. For a moment, I saw the fear beneath all her planning. She was 69. Dad was 71. The house had made the future feel controllable. One daughter owned the roof. The other could live nearby. A granddaughter was growing capable. Those facts had arranged themselves into security in my mother's mind. Now every person involved was saying the same frightening thing. Ask. Do not assume. The answer might be no. I understood why that scared her. Understanding it did not make it mine to fix. Mom said someday I might need more than I could give back. I might need Lucy to drive me or Amanda to handle something. Maybe then I would be grateful family did not negotiate every act of care. I hope they help me. Exactly. If they choose to, Dad exhaled. You make it sound like everybody needs permission to care about each other. No, caring about someone does not give you ownership of their resources. That house is not a person. No, it was mine. Lucy is a person. Amanda is a person. Their time is theirs. Mom bristled. She said she had never believed Lucy was property. I know you didn't. I'm talking about the habit of deciding that ability creates obligation. That quieted the room. Patricia asked what I thought a family should do when one person genuinely could help and another genuinely needed it. Ask. She shook her head. That word again. Yes. What kind of family has to ask? The kind where the answer matters. My mother stared at me with the familiar expression she used when she believed I had become attached to a technical distinction and lost sight of people. But I could see the people perfectly well. My parents were leaving a comfortable home for a smaller apartment. Amanda was rebuilding after a separation, with less financial cushion than she wanted. Lucy had lost a special role with a grandmother she loved. I had damaged relationships with all of them. The costs were real. But every alternative Patricia had offered solved one cost by assigning another cost to someone else without first securing that person's yes. Then my mother said the sentence I had known was coming. Family makes sacrifices. Lucy lifted her head. Patricia said sacrifice was not exploitation. It was what kept people from becoming strangers who appeared only when circumstances were convenient. She and Dad had sacrificed for Amanda and me. She had given time, sleep, money, plans, privacy, vacations they did not take, things she wanted but postponed because children came first. Dad had worked extra shifts when we were young. They had done those things without making us promise repayment. Her voice shook. I understood why that history felt decisive to her. When Lucy was born, I had also given things up without asking a baby to consent. Sleep, money, weekends, the ability to leave the house without checking a bag first. I had rearranged workdays around fevers and school closings, because that was part of choosing to become her mother. I did not think those choices were meaningless just because Lucy had never signed for them. But I also did not believe they purchased pieces of her adulthood. I would not someday tell Lucy that because I had stayed awake with her when she had the flu at 6, she owed me Tuesday afternoons at 40. I would not tell her that college help entitled me to choose where she lived. Raising a child created responsibility in the parent, before it created debt in the child. I said that carefully because I did not want to pretend gratitude was worthless. I was grateful for things my parents had done. Amanda was too. Gratitude could make us want to help. Love could make us choose inconvenience. History could matter when we decided what kind of daughters we wanted to be. What history could not do was turn an unasked future yes into property. Amanda nodded once. She said she did not want our parents to hear her refusal of automatic caregiving as a promise never to help. She had already put Mom as an emergency contact on forms before, and had picked up prescriptions for Dad more than once. She expected to keep doing ordinary things when she could. What had changed was that she no longer accepted the idea that the location of her home should be chosen partly to guarantee those services. Patricia listened, but her face showed the distinction still felt artificial to her. To me, it was the entire point. I did not doubt that much of what she had said about their sacrifices was true. My parents had sacrificed. They had loved us. Those facts could coexist with everything that had happened. Dad placed his palm on the table. He said family obligations existed because people belonged to one another, in ways strangers did not. We can belong together without owning each other's choices, I said. That was when Lucy spoke. She had been quiet for nearly the entire conversation. Her thumbs rubbed together near the edge of the table. She did not look like a child preparing a winning line. She looked uncomfortable. Her voice was small. Then what were you sacrificing for us? No one moved. Lucy looked at me immediately, as if wondering whether she had broken the rule. I did not answer for her. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. Dad shifted in his chair. The furnace clicked off, leaving the room so quiet I could hear a box settle against another in the hallway. Finally, Patricia said, "Lucy, we have done a great deal for this family." Lucy nodded quickly. "I know." There was no challenge in her voice. "I mean now." She looked down at her hands and waited. Patricia searched for an answer. She said they had been willing to give up privacy by letting Amanda and the children move in. That was true, but the house was mine, and the same arrangement gave my parents the proximity and future help they wanted. Mom said they were opening their home to family. No one corrected the word home. Then she said they were giving up the place now. That was also true, but the move was not a sacrifice they had volunteered to make for us. It was a consequence of my decision to end an arrangement they wanted to keep. Lucy waited without pressing. Finally, Patricia said, "This is not something a child should have to understand." Before I could respond, Dad spoke. "No." Patricia turned toward him. He looked down at the table. She asked a fair question. The room changed. Dad had not joined my side. He said he still believed families owed one another more than strangers did. He still thought I had handled the sale too abruptly. He still believed children should contribute and adults sometimes did things they did not feel like doing because others depended on them. Then he looked at Lucy. "But I shouldn't have told you to eat later." Lucy went very still. It was not an apology large enough to repair Christmas. It did not erase the finger pointing toward the kitchen, but it was the first time my father had named his own action, without hiding it inside a larger explanation. "Okay," Lucy whispered. Dad nodded. Patricia looked between them, almost unsettled by the simplicity of the exchange. I did not use it to demand an apology from her. Instead, I told my parents what the future would actually be. The sale would close on schedule. They would move into the 2-bedroom apartment they had selected. I would pay for the moving truck because I had offered and they had accepted. I would not subsidize a larger unit. Amanda would live in her own apartment, and any future help she gave Mom and Dad would be what she freely agreed to when an actual need arose. Lucy would not be default childcare, household help, or the person everyone assumed would notice what needed doing. None of those boundaries meant I was declaring the family over. If Dad needed a ride someday, he could ask. If Mom wanted help comparing paperwork, she could ask. If Amanda needed me to take Chloe and Owen for a specific afternoon, and I was available, she could ask. If Lucy wanted to bake bread with Grandma, she could. A request could be generous. A yes could be generous. A no had to remain possible. Mom said, "So that's it? Every person for themselves unless they happen to feel charitable?" No. You keep treating a boundary like abandonment because the alternative you want is automatic access. She shook her head. I did not chase agreement. I'm not asking you to use my words. I'm telling you the terms under which I can stay in a relationship without rebuilding the same system. Dad asked. And if we don't like the terms? For once, it sounded like a real question. Then you decide what relationship you want with me. He looked toward the boxes. There was no practical lever left. The apartment keys were in his possession. The truck was scheduled. Buyers were waiting for closing. Amanda had her lease. Lucy no longer wanted the title of right hand. The meeting could not restore the old arrangement. It could only decide whether we would keep speaking after it ended. Dad rubbed his thumb over a scratch in the tabletop. The truck is Friday at 9, he said. I know. We'll have the apartment ready before then. Okay. That was his acceptance. Not of my whole argument. Of reality. Patricia did not give me the same thing. She said she still believed I was teaching everyone to think too individually. Families became fragile, she said, when people kept asking where obligation ended. Maybe ours became fragile because nobody was allowed to ask before. She did not answer. Amanda checked the time. Lucy shifted in her chair. The meeting ended without anyone announcing it. My mother gathered the coffee mugs. For 1 second, I expected her to hand one to Lucy out of habit. She carried them herself. Lucy noticed. So did I. On the drive home, Lucy asked whether Grandpa had meant what he said about Christmas. I think he meant the part he said. Was it an apology? Not exactly. She considered that. It was kind of close. Kind of. 4 days later, I returned to the house for the move-out. The truck had come and gone. The large dining table was gone too. My parents had sold it because it would not fit comfortably in the apartment. The living room echoed. Pale marks remained where furniture had protected the carpet. Patricia was already at the apartment with the last carload. Robert stayed behind for the final walkthrough. I did not bring Lucy. She was at school, and this part belonged to adults. Dad and I moved room by room without ceremony. Windows locked, faucets off, garage empty, no damage beyond ordinary wear. When we reached the dining room, he stopped. The room looked smaller without the table. For years, that room had held birthdays. Thanksgiving, Christmas, Dad at the head, Mom moving dishes, children growing tall enough to trade booster seats for regular chairs. And one Christmas afternoon, Lucy standing beside an empty seat. Dad looked toward the kitchen doorway. His face changed, but I could not know what he was thinking. I did not ask. He reached into his coat pocket and took out the keys. The ring held the front door key, the mailbox key, and the old spare for the side door. 5 years earlier, I had handed that ring to him and said they could stay as long as the arrangement worked for everyone. Somewhere along the way, all of us had stopped hearing the condition in that sentence. Dad placed the keys in my palm. His hand stayed there for a second. Then he looked once more toward the empty dining room. We're out. That was all. No speech repaired everything. I closed my hand around the keys. The keys stayed in my coat pocket until I got home. I could feel them there while I drove, a small hard weight against my hip every time I turned. For years, I had carried access to that house in less visible ways. Repair invoices in a folder, a spare key in a kitchen drawer, insurance renewals in my email. The quiet knowledge that if the furnace failed, or the property tax changed, or the roof needed work, the problem would eventually come to me. That afternoon, Robert had placed the last physical symbol of his authority in my hand and said only, "We're out." 5 days later, the sale closed. There was no family gathered around a table to watch it happen. No dramatic transfer of a giant check. Denise sent me the final timeline. I signed what needed to be signed. The buyers completed their side, and the property passed out of my life the same way most real property does. Through appointments, electronic documents, and people verifying numbers that had already been agreed upon. My parents received no part of the sale proceeds because there was no part that belonged to them. They had never owned the house. They had paid below market rent for 5 years. under the arrangement we all knew existed. Even if they had learned to speak about the house as if time and memory had slowly converted permission into title. The money that remained after the mortgage balance, closing costs, and the ordinary expenses of the sale went to me. I did not announce the amount. Patricia did not ask. That surprised me more than I expected. For a while, I had imagined she might make one last argument that years of rent or holiday hosting entitled them to something. Instead, by the time the closing happened, the practical facts had already worn down the fantasy. She and Dad had keys to their new apartment. Their furniture had been measured against rooms that were smaller than the ones they were leaving. Their monthly budget had been written on paper. The old dining table did not fit. That table became the last piece of the old house to cause a disagreement. Mom wanted to store it somewhere until they found a reason to use it again. Dad said a storage unit large enough to keep the table and several other pieces would cost more every month than the furniture was worth. Patricia hated that answer because the table was not worth what it had cost. It was worth Christmas dinners, birthdays, graduations, arguments, and the image she still carried of herself at the center of the family. I understood that. I also did not offer my garage. In the end, they sold the table to a couple furnishing an older house across town. Dad told me the buyers had brought a trailer and needed 3 people to get it through the front door. He sounded almost impressed by the logistics. Mom did not mention it for several weeks. The apartment changed other things more quietly. There was no basement to fill. No garage wall for Dad to organize around himself. Their second bedroom held a smaller desk, a bookcase, and a fold-out sofa, instead of becoming another place where the family could assume there was always room. Their rent was just under $1,800, exactly as they had planned, and now the electricity, internet, and the rest of the utilities arrived in their names at the full amount. They could afford it. They simply had less money left over for the things the old arrangement had made easy. Patricia stopped ordering home decorations every time a season changed. Dad compared grocery prices more carefully. They ate out less. When Mom complained once that the apartment charged an extra monthly fee for a covered parking upgrade they had decided not to take, I almost reminded her how many years I had absorbed the difference between what they paid me and what the house could have earned. I did not. The consequence did not need a speech. It arrived every month on its own. Amanda moved into her apartment the following weekend. Chloe got the small den for homework, though Owen kept trying to negotiate pieces of it for his soccer gear. Amanda worked out the after-school schedule she had been worrying about since December. Owen added another afternoon to his program. Chloe came home on her own 2 days a week for a short stretch before Amanda finished work, and on the occasional day when a schedule failed, Amanda made a specific call to a specific person, rather than announcing that family would cover it. Sometimes that person was me. Sometimes it was not. Lucy was never placed on the schedule. That mattered. It did not mean she stopped being a cousin. One afternoon in March, Chloe called her about a math assignment. Lucy spent 40 minutes at our kitchen table showing her how to work through a set of fractions over video chat. When they finished, Chloe asked if Lucy could help again the next day. Lucy looked toward me out of habit. Then she stopped herself. "I have art club tomorrow," she said. "Maybe Thursday." Chloe said okay. No one told Lucy that being a good cousin meant skipping art club. The conversation lasted less than a minute. I remembered it for months. By then, my relationship with my parents had settled into something less dramatic than reconciliation and more honest than pretending nothing had happened. There were stretches when Patricia and I spoke only once a week. There were other weeks when she called twice because she had found a recipe Lucy might like, or Dad had a question about a utility bill. I did not count the calls. I did notice the shape of the requests. The first real test came in April. Dad had a follow-up appointment at the medical center on a morning when Patricia's car was scheduled for service. She called me 3 days ahead instead of the night before. "Would you be able to drive us?" she asked. The wording caught me off guard. Not, "We need you to take us." Not, Your father has an appointment. Not, family should help when somebody needs it. Would you be able to? I checked my calendar. I had a flexible morning and could move one meeting without causing anyone else trouble. Yes, I said. I can pick you up at 9. Patricia went quiet for half a beat, as though she had expected the boundary itself to require a fight. Then she said, "Thank you." That was all. I drove them. Dad complained about downtown parking. Mom brought coffee in a travel cup that leaked near the lid. We made it to the appointment with 10 minutes to spare. I worked from a cafe while they were inside, then took them home. I did not feel trapped. I did not feel resentful. I had said yes because I wanted to, and because I could. The second test came 6 weeks later. Patricia called on a Friday afternoon and asked if I could spend Sunday helping them reorganize the apartment storage cage downstairs. She and Dad had put too much into it during the move and wanted another pair of hands to sort what could be donated. Before Christmas, that request would have rearranged my weekend automatically. I already had plans with Lucy. We were going to a student art show in the afternoon, and afterward she wanted to stop for milkshakes with 2 friends. "I can't Sunday," I said. Mom paused. "When can you?" I felt the old answer rising before I even formed it. I could check next Saturday. I could stop after work Tuesday. I could ask Lucy's father to switch part of a weekend. I could make something fit. Then I remembered that no did not require me to manufacture a replacement. "Yes. I'm not sure," I said. "You and Dad may need to do it in smaller batches." Patricia did not like that. I heard it in the silence. "You know his knees bother him if he goes up and down too much." "I know." Another pause. For a moment I expected the old sentence. "You're the one who can handle more. We're your parents. What exactly are you doing that is more important?" It never came. Mom said, "All right, we'll figure it out." They did. Dad borrowed a flat cart from the building manager, and they sorted the storage space over 2 afternoons instead of 1. A neighbor helped carry one heavier box to the donation pile. Nothing broke. No relationship ended. No one spent the next 6 months reminding me that I had refused. That ordinary Sunday taught me almost as much as Christmas had. For years, I had treated every family need like a fire alarm. If I heard it, I responded. The idea that someone might need to solve a problem without me had felt like proof I was failing them. Now, a problem could remain someone else's problem, without becoming evidence that I did not love them. Lucy noticed the difference before I realized she was watching. It happened at a family dinner Amanda hosted in early summer. Her apartment was too small for all of us to sit comfortably, so she reserved the community room in her complex. It was nothing special. Vinyl floors, stackable chairs, a little kitchenette, 2 long folding tables, but Chloe had decorated one wall with paper flowers, and Owen had placed a handwritten sign on the door that said "Family Dinner," and then added "No socks are inside" after Amanda made him. Everyone brought something. Amanda made baked chicken. I brought salad and bread. Patricia brought a pan of potatoes. Dad carried drinks. Chloe and Owen put napkins and forks at each place. No one formally assigned Lucy a task. She helped anyway. That mattered too. She arrived carrying a bowl of strawberries because she had washed and cut them at home. When she saw Amanda struggling with a tray, she held the door. She helped Chloe straighten the forks because Chloe had put 2 at one place and none at another. Then Lucy went outside with Owen for 10 minutes while the adults finished arranging the food. Patricia watched her leave. I watched Patricia. Mom said nothing. When Lucy came back, she carried the bread basket to the table without being asked. She put it down, looked around once, and asked if anyone still needed something. Amanda said no. So Lucy sat. The movement was so simple I almost missed its significance. No one praised her for being mature. No one told her she was the only one who knew how things should be done. No one made her keep moving, because she had already demonstrated that she was capable of moving. She ate while the food was hot. Halfway through dinner, Patricia asked Chloe to pass the potatoes. Chloe did. Owen spilled water and got up for paper towels himself. Dad needed another drink and went to the kitchenette to get it. The meal was not more efficient than my mother's old Christmas system. It was better. That evening, on the drive home, Lucy asked whether I had noticed Grandma did not call her right hand once. I noticed, I said. Do you think she wanted to? I considered the question. Probably. Lucy smiled a little. Me too. She looked out the window. Then she said, I helped anyway. I noticed that too. She turned back toward me. It didn't feel the same. I did not ask her to explain. I knew what she meant. By fall, the new habits were becoming ordinary. Amanda and I traded specific favors instead of assuming access to each other's time. Patricia called before asking for Lucy. The first time Lucy said no because she had plans with a friend, Mom's disappointment flickered. Then she said, another time then. Robert changed more through behavior than apology. At the final family meeting, he had admitted he should not have told Lucy to eat later. Afterward, when he almost asked Lucy alone to clear plates at Amanda's place, he caught himself, looked at Chloe and Owen, and said, Can you three take these over? All three children got up. I noticed and left it there. When December came again, none of us suggested trying to recreate Christmas in Patricia and Robert's apartment. There simply was not enough room. Amanda reserved the community room in her complex for Christmas Day because it could hold everyone without anyone needing to rearrange their life around hosting. She made a sign-up list for food, not assignments offers. Patricia chose sweet potatoes and pie. I took turkey and rolls. Amanda handled vegetables. Dad offered drinks and ice. Chloe wanted to decorate. Owen wanted to help with the music and had to be reminded that a playlist containing 4 versions of the same soccer anthem did not count as Christmas music. Lucy volunteered to bring cookies she and Patricia had made together 2 days earlier. That detail mattered to me more than I told her. She was still baking with Grandma. The relationship had survived the loss of the job title. Christmas morning 2027 was cold and clear. There was no new snow, only old gray patches along the edges of parking lots where plows had piled it days earlier. Lucy and I arrived at the community room first because I had the turkey, and Amanda had asked me to help her warm the side dishes. Asked. I said yes. For 40 minutes, the room was ordinary chaos. Foil pans, serving spoons, Chloe taping paper snowflakes to a wall, Owen testing the speaker volume until Amanda threatened to remove his music privileges entirely. Lucy set out her cookies, then helped me carry a basket of rolls from the kitchenette. After that, she stopped. She sat beside Chloe and watched a video on Chloe's phone while the adults finished. I saw her there and kept moving. I did not ask if she wanted to help with one more thing. At noon, the door opened and my parents came in. Patricia carried her own casserole dish with oven mitts wrapped around the handles. Robert had a grocery bag with drinks and a container of ice. Dad looked around the room, as if instinctively searching for the head of a table that did not exist. There were 2 long folding tables pushed together. No special chair, no old dining room, no house he controlled. He set the drinks down. Mom took her casserole to the kitchenette herself. Lucy got up. For a second, my body tightened. Then she crossed the room and hugged Patricia. Do you want help with the foil? She asked. My mother looked at her. I watched the answer. Yes, please. Not, I need my right hand. Not, you know how I like it. Please. Lucy helped remove the foil, carried a serving spoon to the table, and returned to Chloe before anyone asked her to do anything else. Patricia adjusted the dish on her own. Dad filled cups with ice. Amanda carried vegetables out. I sliced turkey. Chloe brought napkins. Owen put out the rolls and ate one before we sat down. which Amanda pretended not to see. There was no perfectly symbolic moment where everyone suddenly understood everything. There were people bumping elbows and asking where the gravy had gone. There was Dad complaining that the folding chairs were too low. There was Patricia telling Amanda she should have brought the green beans she used to make, and Amanda reminding her she had volunteered for carrots. There was Lucy laughing because Owen had put too much whipped cream on a piece of pie before dinner even started. It looked like a family, an imperfect one, a family without a throne. When the food was ready, something small happened. Dad was standing behind a chair near one end of the table. For most of my life, he would have sat first. That was what he did at the old house. He took his place and expected the room to arrange itself around the fact that he had taken it. This time he waited. Maybe he was only waiting because Amanda was still carrying a dish. Maybe he remembered last Christmas. I did not know. I did not need to know. I looked around the room. "Everybody sit," I said. Everyone did. At the same time. Patricia sat beside Robert. Amanda sat across from them. Chloe and Owen dropped into their chairs, still arguing about the speaker. Lucy pulled out the chair beside me. No one stopped her. No one pointed toward the kitchenette. No one called anyone a guest. Lucy did not look around to see whether another task was waiting. She did not ask if Grandma needed her. She did not wait for permission. She sat down. The turkey was still hot when I put some on her plate. She reached for a roll and asked Chloe something about school. Robert passed the potatoes without telling anyone what they should be doing. Patricia ate the food she had brought and did not scan the room for work Lucy could absorb. I sat there for a moment longer than anyone noticed. A year earlier, ownership had given me the legal power to end the housing arrangement. The harder thing to end was the rule underneath it, that capable people owed more of themselves simply because they could. I looked at Lucy. She was eating while the food was still hot. No one pointed toward the kitchen. No one asked her to prove she belonged. The house had never been the inheritance at stake. The inheritance I refused to pass on was the belief that love had to be earned by becoming useful enough to disappear into everyone else's needs.